What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome back from the break, gang. Got Gun in the chat. We've got Trey in the chat. We've got Lone Wolf. Lone Wolf, welcome back to you too, pal. Welcome back to everybody. It was a long couple of days with no baseball there. I got a weird little thing going on with my hair over here. It's right back on track for this show and the way that we usually start things off here on the MLB Lineup Card show. Steven Leibowitz hanging out in the chat. Mamba's here. Trey, get the whole gang. Could be Travis. Travis says, oh shit, Guns in the chat. Got to take an honorary bong hit from my man who doesn't smoke. Love it. Yep, always got to cover for the folks who don't partake. No judgment, no anything, but we got to make sure that gets smoked somewhere along the way, right? I know Gun's been focusing a lot on the wrestling these days. Hopefully it's going well. Hopefully he's not in too much pain. I know he's dealing with a lot of heat down there. I saw 106. I don't know if that was from today or yesterday or over the weekend or what, but, well, I guess it's not the weekend. It's Friday. But you know what I mean, during the break. But I saw a lot of high temps from the Gundacker Twitter feed there. Trey, my break was pretty good, but enjoyed the hell out of the All-Star game. Thought it was a fun one. Watched the Home Run Derby. Just kind of chilled. Didn't end up creating any content. I know as we were going away, I was like, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. I took it off. I got deep into the not doing anything. Actually finally got into Elden Ring on my fifth attempt to start that game. Finally, I followed everybody's advice who was saying don't go directly to the place it tells you to go to where you just keep on dying and the game sucks and it just gets frustrating. Wander around and explore and actually enjoy the game, which I've done to great success. So I'm kind of into that. Looking forward to getting back into that later on. What else did I do? I saw my mom. She came up. We hung out on Tuesday, I want to say, for a little bit. Got some lunch. Hung out and took the dog to the park. Nice little afternoon with mom. Not too much else. Just mostly hung around. You know, like I said, got deep into the not doing anything. Derby was better than the All-Star game. That was a fun home run derby. I enjoyed that derby. I had me and my friends every year do a little pool. We just chop up the hitters, do a quick little draft. So I had my guy Lou Bob. Thought I was going to get there, but it fell apart a little bit. But hey, it's a fun home run derby anyway. Speaking of fun, we've got a really interesting slate. There's a lot of weather around the league. Not that that's the fun part, obviously. Got to deal with a lot of weather here on this slate. But I don't think I don't want to say nothing is going to get rained out, but it seems like most of these situations, just reading some of the various Twitter feeds and looking at some of the weather, it seems like most of these situations are rain in the area, maybe a scheduled late start in some of these, but good to go for the most part. So I'm hoping that's what we get. We'll see what happens with some of this. But I know there's rain inbound for the New York area. Right now it's okay, but it's one of those days where it's kind of hazy. You can kind of feel the rain coming. So I think that's what we're dealing with in a lot of these spots. It's one where we're going to have to keep a close eye on it going into lock. Keep a weather eye on the weather, as they say. Craig says almost 200 hours into Elden Ring. Nice. Yeah, I'm so bad at a lot of modern games these days that it takes me even longer than that. So I'll go probably well beyond the 200 hours. I've got a solid handful of hours in just exploring without even going to what you call a castle yet. So definitely enjoying it though. And yeah, I've gotten a couple hundred hours into Red Dead was the last big open world game I got into. That was all through COVID, and after that I finally got into Red Dead and knocked that out. So I love a good open world game. It's just I gotta have a nice chunk of time to get into it like I did this week. So now I'll just keep on rolling with it and playing that during the nights and everything. But let's get in. Joker's sitting here. He's just telling me let's get into this slate. So let's get into this slate. Hey, why don't you go lie down, pal? I'm doing it. I'm gonna open it up right now. Go lie down. Thank you for the reminder about the time. He wants to make sure we're hitting a good clip here. We do have 14 games to talk about. Not a lot of time to dilly-dally. So let's dive on in. It's an interesting one. Like I was starting to say, it's a really deep pitching slate. It's got a few really high-end guys on it. A lot of good spots to go to that are kind of obvious, kind of glaring, high strikeout guys in good matchups. But I think there's a really, really big plateau of guys like FanDuel projection-wise from 25 to 30 FanDuel points. It's most of the board. I think most of the 28 pitchers in play are at least somewhat playable. A lot of them are full bore playable, especially at price, especially with popularity considerations. So I think there's some excellent opportunities on deck here. This first game off the top, Sandy Alcantara going up against Dean Kramer here. 6,800, 8,200. Obviously, you're getting Sandy at really, really good prices. He's struggled significantly compared to who he typically is, or who he was last year anyway. 23.4% strikeouts last year, won the Cy Young Award. Dominant season from him. But what I've talked about a number of times is it's not like he won his Cy Young on the back of 30+% strikeouts. He's dipped in his strikeouts, but it was only from like a 24% guy to about a 20% guy this year. So it's a dip, but it's not necessarily representative of something tragic going on. It's just he compiled a lot of strikeouts in a lot of deep starts last year. He's pitched deep into a lot of these games, but he's not seeing a lot of the complete game type games this season because he's run into those big innings with some run trouble. So 4.72 ERA, a 4.05 xFIP is a lot better than that ERA. Still 12.6% swing, 27.1% CSW. The strike throwing is right on par with what he did last year. The stuff is working essentially the same way it did last year. I looked through his mechanics. I looked through everything in terms of the pitch mechanisms, the pitch mix, how things are working. He's lost a little bit of horizontal movement, which I think is a little bit of the key into the pitches being a little bit more hittable this year. But it's really only been in a few tragic spots that have really cost him badly. I don't think he's that far off form. So at price, at 68, especially on that DK slate, but also at 82, he's firmly in that plateau of guys that you can absolutely play on this slate. He has a fairly significant ceiling for those prices in this matchup. So I think there's a good opportunity for him here to post a pretty strong score and a slate relevant score. He projects fairly well. This is another game. This is one of the games that has a little bit of weather potentially in it. So it's something to watch there. At the same time, on the other side of it, 7,100, oddly more expensive Dean Kramer on the DK slate, 8,600, more expensive on both sides, actually. He projects well. He's higher projected in my model here, going up against the lowly Marlins. 22% strikeouts on the season, a 4.78 ERA. The thing that concerns me with Kramer is that home run rate, the 4.78 home run rate, matches his 4.78 ERA. That's not great. 10.8% barrels, not great. 44.8% hard hits, 90.7 on the exit velo. None of that is good. There is strikeout potential. He is facing the Miami Marlins, a low-end team that has two excellent players at the top of the lineup in Luis Arraez and Jorge Soler, and then kind of trails off. Brian De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez are both interesting players. Garrett Cooper's shown a lot of power this season, but they're three flawed players in the 3 through 5 spots, and then it's just dead at Gene Segura, Joey Wendell, Jacob Stallings, and Dane Myers. So I think there's a little bit of opportunity here for Kramer, but if I'm picking one of these guys, I kind of have to lean into Sandy, even with the tougher matchup going up against the Orioles here. I just think there's a little bit more to sink our teeth into with that one. Just a little bit more faith in that pitcher, his stuff, the way that his stuff works. If I expect one of these two guys to get blown up, it's more likely going to be Kramer. But I think at price, with projection in mind, with popularity in mind, there's a strong case to be made for playing some Dean Kramer shares here too. The Marlins are not overly good, so I think there's a good opportunity for him. You're talking about a Miami team that ranks 22nd with a 93 WRC plus against righties this year. Only 20.5% strikeouts. So they put the ball in play. They limit strikeouts fairly effectively, but only a 132 ISO in the split against righties for the active roster. Not a great Miami lineup. If I'm going to them, it's really those top 5 guys, including Garrett Cooper. Just mix and match your way through those guys. It's very easy to afford them. You get the obvious quality with Arraez and Soler. One guy gets on, the other guy knocks him in. It's pretty straightforward. Then it's the remaining 3 guys and whatever they do together, kind of as like almost 2 separate groups. Not really, because obviously, Soler could strike out and leave Arraez on base for De La Cruz, for Sanchez, any of these guys. But that's in the ideal form. Those guys set the pace early, and then the next 3 kind of pick up the baton from there. On the other side of this one, I think you can definitely take some shares of the Orioles against Sandy here. Gunnar off the top, Adley Rutschman, Anthony Santander, Ryan O'Hearn, Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins. There's obvious quality 1 through 6 there. They've been kind of rolling through the season. Some ups and downs, for some of these guys, and like Ryan O'Hearn still playing above his head, but he hasn't been priced up. It's not like they're charging in the 4s or 5s for O'Hearn on DK. He's 3,400 on DK, 2,800 on the FanDuel slate, 12.4% barrels, 59% hard hits. At those prices, that's really all I need to know. I know it's what he has done, not what he will do, and what he will do is decline through the second half of the season. If he continues out this kind of a pace, he's obviously a much, much better player than we've thought he was over the past couple of years. I don't really expect that, but I think if you're building Orioles stacks with him at those prices, he's priced like the regular Ryan O'Hearn. So if you get the productivity, you're just happy for it. Hayes has had a great year, 3,700, 2,900. He's still really cheap for a guy with 314, 355, 498, and 36% better than average grading runs. So I really like Hayes. Mullins from the left side drops in the lineup now that Gunner's hitting leadoff, but I think it's an effective spot for him. He's a 30-30 guy a couple years ago, so excellent bat there. Aaron Hicks is playable. Adam Frazier, Jordan Westberg, so no Colton Cowser today. That's a downgrade for the lineup overall, but Frazier's playable. Westberg's a value play, 3,100 on at the bottom of the lineup, but certainly your quality for Baltimore is 1 through 3, whatever you think of O'Hearn, and then 5 and 6. So your focus players are here. Playable stack, not a top end lineup for me today. They rank, where do they rank? 14th, like right in the exact middle of the board by projections on the board, but lower end value numbers and very low home run number, 25th by home run upside. So that's that one, top and bottom. Getting to shares, some shares, let me recap it. Definite interest in both pitchers. Sandy preferred over Kramer, but it's fairly close, and it's all price-driven, popularity-driven. Orioles probably preferred a little bit in terms of the bats over the Marlins, but not overly interested in either of these teams. Marlins ranked 23rd by projection on the board. Giants and the Pirates. Russ Stripling against Rich Hill. I don't really have much interest in either one of these guys. You can see that Rich Hill projects fairly well against the Giants here. I don't know that I buy that. 21.1% strikeouts, 9% walks, a 4.55 xFIP, a 4.78 ERA on the season for Hill, giving up 11% barrels in his 18 starts, 98 innings, 3.01% home runs, 40.1% hard hits. He's gettable. I know he can pitch well in his spots. He's a veteran guy, left-hander, et cetera, a guy we've seen succeed in the past. I just don't know that I buy this kind of a projection for him that plays similarly to a lot of guys that I like better. But the value is certainly there. At 6,000, you're not gonna be making a mistake saying, "Hey, I want to throw a couple Rich Hill darts today." He's very, very cheap. He could easily, achieve this kind of a score. It's not out of the question here against the Giants that are not an aggressively free-swinging bunch, but certainly plenty of strikeouts in that lineup for him. There's also some very good right-handed hitters, some guys who focus on hitting lefties well, but they're better as lefties against a righty than they are against a lefty. So I think there's a little bit of upside for Hill. I just don't know if I need to get there, particularly on FanDuel. 7,800, it's not like it's a bad price, but just with so many options, do I really want to get to that many Rich Hill shares? So I'll probably be mostly tempered. Little bit of value interest there. On the other side, no real interest in Stripling. 18.9% strikeouts in 41 innings, 7 starts, a 6.37 ERA, 3.98 xFIP is obviously a lot better, but still pushing up to 4. 44.8% hard hits, 11.9% barrels, 6.11% home runs. I think he's somewhat targetable. I just don't love this Pittsburgh lineup for doing it. Pirates rank somewhere on the board. They're last on the board by overall projection, which could potentially be a little bit inaccurate. Like I would probably, if I was just doing it top of my head, I would probably slide them above like Detroit, Oakland, Washington, and Kansas City, the 4 teams they rank immediately behind. But I don't know how much higher up than that I would get with this lineup. They're not a good team. Top 3, top 4 maybe in a stack. Maybe you work Ji-Man Choi in there as a top 5. But overall, it's not great. They're very easy to afford. Brian Reynolds, the most expensive hitter on DK at 52. Jack Suwinski at 34, the most expensive hitter, justifiably on the FanDuel slate. Suwinski's got 19 homers, a 280 ISO, at 135 WRC plus, 51.7% hard hits, 18.5% barrels. He's been their best player. I don't think there's any argument to be made. He's got a 14.28 in the home run model. If I'm rostering one Pirates player, it's Jack Suwinski today. If I'm stacking them, I'm looking to him with Brian Reynolds, Henry Davis, maybe some Carlos Santana, maybe some Ji-Man Choi. Beyond that, it's kind of ugly with Jared Triolo, Tucupita Marcano, Nick Gonzalez, Austin Hedges down the bottom there. Gonzalez, 113 WRC plus with 2 homers and a 222 ISO and 58 plate appearances. We took a look at him the other day, though. Didn't look like much of a high-end prospect. Just kind of a guy who might stick as like a utility man, 400 or 500 plate appearances a year kind of a guy, not really a high-end player. You can get him cheap, multi-position on DK if you want him. It's not a great spot. So really, it's that top 5 at most for Pittsburgh and not a lot of it if I'm going to it. I think I'm a little bit more excited to roster Giants hitters. They're fairly inexpensive. There's some bats that I like. I like Austin Slater in the leadoff spot to set the pace. 422 on base is not going to be sustained much longer beyond his 90 plate appearances so far, but he's been really good getting on base, creating runs, 3 home runs, 2 stolen bases so far this season, 52% better than average creating runs in 90 plate appearances. Not that player overall, but a good productive player, especially as a righty against a lefty. Wilmer, we know there's power there. We know he's got 8 home runs overall in the season in 205 plate appearances. He used to be a platoon specialist against lefties that we would go to time and again. And he's kind of more just an everyday player at cheap prices these days. 3,200, 2,900. Happy to go to shares of Wilmer Flores against a flawed lefty. Michael Conforto, lefty in this spot. I don't really mind that much. 13 home runs overall in the season. I'm probably more interested in J.D. Davis for 43.31 across sites at third base. 11 home runs from the right side. Definite power upside. Just a very good bat. 48.7% hard hits, 10.1% barrels. A good right-handed hitter who is at a very fair price cleaning up for this lineup. Pat Bailey, Jock Peterson against the lefty I don't love. Luis Matos, Casey Schmidt, Brandon Crawford kind of also trails off toward the bottom. I would, if I was going over the top with giant stacks, certainly take shares of Bailey, particularly on DK where you need catchers. He's been really good this year, 293, 324, 493, 200 ISO, 5 homers in only 150 plate appearances. So he's an effective catcher to use. Jock against a lefty, like I said, I don't love, but if you expect that they're going to blow up Rich Hill, then you're probably getting a few plate appearances of Jock against a righty out of the bullpen. So I think you can go there. It's just not my priority play in stacking Giants, but if I'm building 20 Giant stacks, he's probably in half of them, somewhere around there. Bottom with Matos, Schmidt, and Crawford, mix and match type options. So this one is really neither pitcher. If I'm going to either pitcher, gun to my head, it's DK, Rich Hill. FanDuel Rich Hill as well, but I don't love it over on that side, just given the wealth of options. He's in the mix, but he's not my preferred option. Stripling, no. Giant stacks, yes. Focused on the top end. Pirate stacks, meh. But focused on the top end if you do it. There's definite upside there. It's going up against Ross Stripling. I don't want to undersell the opportunity for the Pirates. Stripling's allowed a 6.11% home run rate in 7 starts, 11.9% barrels. There's good reason to attack Ross Stripling here with bats. It's just a low-end squad on a deep day with 28 teams to choose from. I don't want to make them a priority. At worst, I want to have them just kind of on the board as a mid-level team. They definitely should be a better looking option than maybe they look like in the projections. In the home run model and the power index, they rank 9th out of the 28 teams. So that offsets, hopefully a little bit, the power upside potentially offsets the where the fantasy point projections are averaging down to. I hope this mouse isn't dying. That would be annoying. I might have to, if this mouse died, I would probably have to take a break and run across the street to the bodega and buy new batteries. Let's hope we don't have to do that. Come on. All right. I think we're okay. Seemed like a weird, just a little slowdown. All right, cool. We're back. Let me jump into the chat, see what's going on there. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe. I really appreciate it when you guys do that, by the way. With 200 and some odd views on the video from the day before the All-Star break there, and good handful of likes on them. You know, it was a solid percentage. Wasn't all of them. I like to see it when it's all of them, of course, but love seeing those likes. Really helps me, especially, you know, on a grindy day. Today was fun to dive back into, but like by the middle of next week, it'll feel a little bit grindy again. You know, having to knock out like a 12 gamer on next Wednesday or whatever it'll be. So those likes just help keep the motor running a little bit. Let's see. We got Trey in the chat. We got Chuck. It looks like a lot of chat about some optimizers. Chuck says on FanDuel, Erod is getting 0 ownership, and I love it. He's expensive, but he can put up a 60 all day. Chuck, I love that spot as well, particularly at low ownership. I'll have a lot of both sides of that game in terms of pitching. It's the last one of the night. We'll get there and eventually, but I like that spot for Erod, particularly at no ownership. I use the, to answer your other question there, Chuck, I use the RG optimizer. I think they're basically all the same. There's a bunch of folks who are doing some stuff in Python, including in our Discord these days. Might have to harangue one of them and get one of those up on our site, carve out a little piece of ownership of a site that makes no money, and offer it up to some of those folks who are making their own optimizers. We'll see what happens, but it seems like it's also fairly easy to do. So I think there's an opportunity for people to go out and just make your own. It seems straightforward enough. You can get help from ChatGPT with writing the code if you need it. It's a lot of ways to go. But there is also a lot of public product out there. I find great success with the RG one. I'm not allowed to use Fantasy Cruncher, but I had great success when I did use Fantasy Cruncher. I know that SaberSim is a thing. I know that there's a few other ones. A couple also rants. A couple mediocre ones. The one thing I would say is to be aware of the ones that just kind of mash things together. Any optimizer that's going to give you an immediate output in like 2 seconds is doing things differently than the optimizers that'll take 5 minutes to give you a couple hundred lineups, just in terms of how they process things. So just be aware of the ways that the different types of sites go about making lineups differently. Not that one is wrong and one is right. It's particularly, especially if you're sorting things, but if you're just a person who, hey, I'm going to dash off 100 lineups, I'm going to take out the top 10 by ownership, take out the bottom 10 by projection, and just play the middle, then you want to be aware of how those lineups came together. So a couple things do things a little bit differently. Chuck says I'm barely allowed to use FC. Those dudes. Why am I not allowed? Tommy, I've told the story a little bit in years past, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. Suffice to say, difference of opinion about professionalism, customer service, and things like that from when I was working at Stochastic running the customer support over there. I still think I was right. And if you know the reputation for that site and how they go about customer service, I think you'll agree with me. Anywho, those aren't the Arizona Diamondbacks. Let me fix that. Drop the wrong confirmed lineup in for Baltimore. Or not, that was Baltimore. Need the Diamondbacks. Like I said the other day, sometimes when I'm dropping these confirmed lineups in a hurry before the show, the copy doesn't quite take, so I end up with the previous one and get the wrong one in there. All right, we're back. Ryan Nelson. I don't think we need to mess with Ryan Nelson on a deep slate like this one. 6,300, 7,500, just not on the board for me. 16% strikeouts, a 5.04 xFIP, 5.19 ERA. In Toronto going up against this Blue Jays lineup, I just don't need to play it. I think that there's, the potential for that arm to come to life someday based on, an okay traditional scouting report and some things he's done in the minors, but so far at the major league level, we just haven't seen it. So I'm not going to any shares of Ryan Nelson. I think I can attack some Ryan Nelson on the tiny little bug is back. I haven't been able to smash this thing yet. It's probably like 11 different tiny little bugs that have had a family like living in this room over time now, but he's here. He's flying around in my face. Loves to buzz the tower just like right there when I'm looking at like this white screen, so it's just like a blip going across my radar. Anyway, the Blue Jays lineup very much in play. They're priced appropriately for who they are, but they're not outrageously expensive. Everybody 5,500 or below on the DK slate. Everybody 3,700 or below on FanDuel, with a lot of cheaper prices in there. So I think you can make a pretty decent stand on Blue Jays stacks here. I think it's justifiable. There's plenty of home run potential, 91.5 miles an hour of exit velo, 43.4% hard hits, 10.9% barrels by Nelson so far this season. It's only amounted to 3.2% home runs, but that feels a little bit lucky given the launch angle, given all those factors. So getting to shares of George Springer, Bo Bichette, Brendan Belt, Vladdy Guerrero off the top is very easy. Working in shares of Matt Chapman, Dalton Varsho for their power from the right side and the left side is easy. They're both at cheap prices. Whit Merrifield, good hit tool, great speed, 19 stolen bases on the year, 286, 342, 392. Kind of a good cog to have in the machine down the bottom of the lineup to help with run creation, to help turn the lineup back over to the top. You get him on base ahead of Varsho, Danny Jansen, one of those two guys homers. Or if they don't, you get at least Merrifield and his speed, hopefully wrapping back around to the top of the lineup. It's a dynamic batting order. There's lots of things to do. The top end is obviously where the stars are. That's where their power is. You get a good offset for price with Brandon Belt up there, 3,100, 2,800. He's hit 6 home runs on the season in 233 plate appearances. It's not quite the Brandon Belt of old, but it's not terrible for 233 plate appearances. A 174 ISO. What I really like about it is, in addition to his cheap price, 11.9% barrels, 42.2% hard hits, getting on base at a 365 clip and creating runs 23% better than average. So even while he's not hitting everything over the wall, and he's a guy who certainly can have a bunch of lefty power in any given slate, he's still been involved with this lineup. So he's not miscast in that 3 spot. He's just cheap. So I really like getting his shares of Belt. He'll probably be popular. He's been popular on a lot of Blue Jays slates. But big slate, I don't expect a ton of ownership on them today. They're one of the more highly projected teams in terms of the run total in Vegas. I think they were 4th out of 4 teams, if I'm remembering that correctly, that were projected over 5. Let me get back to that in the article here. Yeah, the other ones, the Braves, the Rays, and the Yankees. Yanks obviously going to be super popular at Coors Field, leading the slate at 6.79. The Rays are at 6.04. The Braves are at 5.94. The Blue Jays are here at 5.22 runs. So out of that group of teams, considering the Yanks are at Coors and those other 2 spots are going to be super popular, I expect this will be the 4th most highly owned out of those 4 teams. You do get some value opportunity around the Yankees, so maybe they connect in with so many other teams that, it offsets any differentiation in popularity, like Yankees and Blue Jays is viable. So we'll see how it comes in popularity-wise, but I think they do fall in line like 4th out of that group. So I'm kind of interested in this spot going up against Ryan Nelson. Same time, Diamondbacks, I think they're kind of viable here against Jose Barrios. Barrios has been good this year, 23% strikeouts, 3.94 xFIP, a 3.50 ERA, and has corrected his home run issues. 2.95% home runs on the season has brought that back to reality. 8.6% barrels, 34.5% on the hard hits, only 87.7 miles an hour of exit velo on average. He was struggling with power with home run balls through last year, has been up and down over the course of time, is not an ace, but is a playable mid-level pitcher. My issue with Barrios in this spot is his price as compares to a lot of these other guys in the 8s, or there's a lot of guys in the 7s and 8s who project similarly, and there's a lot of guys that are at the ace level that project higher, that for higher prices. Barrios just kind of gets lost in the wash, and I don't know if he's one that I really want to get to because he's lost in the wash, because there's a lot of guys like that today. Like we just talked about Eduardo Rodriguez. I like that spot a lot better. There is a lane for Jose Barrios, but the issue is these low strikeout Diamondbacks, all their good hitters are below 20% strikeouts. Even their bad hitters are in the low 20s. Evan Longoria, I'll forgive his 31.6 based on everything he's done throughout his career, plus his 11 home runs this year in 155 plate appearances, his 288 ISO. You'll take that with his 31% strikeouts, but all these guys are terrific at limiting strikeouts. I don't know how much that leads me to Diamondback stacks. I think I want to have some. I expect they're going to be fairly low owned in this spot. So I think there's a good opportunity to get to Diamondbacks here. I'm just not sure how much of them I want against a guy that I do think is a pretty good pitcher. It seems like one of those spots that we talk about where Barrios comes in, gives up 4 to 5 runs, hits the Vegas total on the head. He's not great. They're not great. Problem solved. Move on. That's what it seems like to me. But this Diamondbacks lineup has been frisky enough that they're at least on the board. Perdomo has been not as good in the leadoff role as I was hoping he would be. It's like an 80-something WRC plus as a leadoff hitter so far. But I think it comes around, especially if he keeps getting on base ahead of this group. He's 350-something on base as a leadoff hitter. So if that holds up, I expect he'll be more productive for runs. Still very cheap, multi-position on DK. The quality is from 2 through 6. With Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll, Christian Walker, Lourdes Gurriel making up most of it. But I would bolt on Evan Longoria for cheap prices, $3,300, $2,700. Even against a righty, I'm not really that concerned about it. He's mostly faced lefties this year, but still perfectly capable of driving the ball, hitting a home run, driving in some runs against a righty. 288 ISO, a 525 slug, 14.1% barrels, 56.5% hard hits. Like the spot for Evan Longoria here. Bottom 3, you take or leave. If you're building an abundance of Diamondback stacks, you definitely want to include Jake McCarthy, Gabe Moreno, and Alek Thomas, but they're not guys to really go out of your way for if you're only building one. And these guys are cheap enough that I think you can string it together. Outside of Marte and Carroll, who are both in the 6s on DK, it's easy enough to get to Diamondbacks bats, and everybody else helped average down those prices. So I think it's fine. Why don't you go lie down, pal? Come on, go lie down. Diamondbacks, Blue Jays. So yeah, less interest probably in Jose Barrios than most, but some interest in him. A minor priority dart throw, not a dart throw. That's not the right way to describe him. A minor priority guy, priced appropriately, but too high relative to other options on the slate is probably the best way to put it. So that just kind of knocks him down the board, just by default, by process. So I don't expect to have much. He could succeed here, but it's a thin path to success with their ability to limit strikeouts. Definite interest in the Blue Jays bats. Going to be enthusiastic on the Blue Jays, particularly if they're not that popular or not as relatively high popular as like the Yankees, as some of these other teams. So I like the Blue Jays spot, and I will have a few shares of Diamondbacks. Some Diamondbacks, mid-board type priority, I think. Tommy David Walker, is there a way to donate to the channel? Right now, with your eyeballs, with spreading the word, with clicking the like button, tell your friends. At some point, we'll figure out whether it's a subscription, whether it's through a lot of eyeballs and sponsorship. I'm not sure how it works out yet, Tommy, but I appreciate that, bud. Right now, spread the word, tell your friends, and that's enough for me. But I do really appreciate it. If you go out there and win $100 grand tonight, you want to Venmo me something, we'll certainly accept donations. But we're not actively soliciting right now, so keep your money dedicated to some entries and go win something tonight. Is how I would put it right now, Tommy. But I appreciate that, bud. Let's move on from this one. A lot to talk about, and not a lot of time to do it in. Coming up on 4:47. 4:47. Traffic on the 20s coming up. Traffic and weather. Weather outside. Still not raining in the New York area. Traffic appears to be moving down Palisade Avenue. And now back to Terry with sports. New York Mets. Los Angeles Dodgers. Figured that would be a relevant spot to do the weather. Not seeing anything in the rain-wise yet in this area, but it is apparently coming. It seems like there are storms headed toward this one. This one seems like one of the more dicey out of the several handful of rain potential games. This is the one I would maybe worry a bit about. That said, it seems like it's going to play. That was the last report that I saw. But definitely keep a good eye on this one, because this is an interesting spot on both sides. I think both Julio Urias and Justin Verlander are at least moderately playable. That's kind of how they project out. Like I said, there's a big plateau of guys between 25 and 30 FanDuel points in my projections here, and Urias and Verlander are on that list. The thing I don't like for Verlander is the matchup against the Dodgers. That's just brutally bad. I like the spot for Urias, 88, 87. Against the Mets, it's playable enough. He's giving a little bit of trouble around home runs this year. 5.26% home runs in 64 and a third innings, 12 starts. That's up, and that's an aggressively high number for only giving up 86.7 miles an hour of exit velo and 32.6% hard hits. So that tells me that's really looking at a handful of mistakes in what is still a somewhat short sample. 64 and a third innings, not a big sample. 23.7% strikeouts, 5.3% walks, a 403 xFIP. Everything else is basically working in Julio Urias style. So I think we can get to him. I think we can play him. It's probably just small doses, a guy that I mix into, 5-10 lineup, something along those lines. If I got carried away beyond that, I'd be surprised, because I think there's a little bit of upside. Did that game postpone? Rays Kansas City postponed? I didn't even see that yet. So I guess that one was the most dangerous on the board. Yeah, last I saw was Mr. Roth's update that said storms clearing after first pitch. If they wait, it's clear the rest of the night. So they scrapped it? Hang on. Confirmation. Confirmation coming. Hold on. Two minutes ago on Twitter. All right. Looks like we got a lot of yeses in the chat there, so I'll take all you guys' word for that. I appreciate it, guys. Always be shouting out any news like that. Definitely wanted to see if I could track that down. So, all right, cool. So we'll skip over that one when we get there. So with that in mind, there's obviously, you might see the same thing happen here, but I do think that there's at least consideration for Urias. Tepid interest in the Mets. If you get the good version of Urias here, I don't really see the Mets giving him much of an issue. You've got obvious home run upside around guys like Lindor, Pete Alonso, Francisco Alvarez, maybe some Tommy Pham, but it's not significant. They've got a lot of struggling guys. They've got a number of just guys who are slap hitters, types who need the ball to fall in for them to get driven in by guys like Lindor and Alonso. It's not ideal going to this Mets team. There's not a ton of great on-base guys. I really like Brandon Nimmo for his on-base skills, and he's a good contributor in terms of a 45.7% hard hit rate in the leadoff spot, 13 homers. He can contribute without help from the rest of the lineup. Tommy Pham does similar things at the plate. Nice bounce-back season for Pham, 9 homers, 10 stolen bases. Got the everyday job in left field. Did anybody see the play where he, I forget who it was. It was Ha-Seong Kim. Kim ripped one down the line. It was clearly just a double in that it was probably the last game, maybe the Saturday game before the break. And Pham went into the corner to get it, picked it up, stood there, not even pretending like he was bobbling it, just not throwing it yet. Stood there, watched Kim watching him as he was rounding second base and watched Kim decide to head for third and then throw a frozen rope to just nail him by like 3 feet at third base. Like, Tommy, you don't run on Tommy Pham's arm, especially if he's sitting there trying to bait you into running. That was a ridiculous play, bad decision by Kim, but just a really, really good play. So if people wonder why Tommy Pham, before he started hitting anyway this year, was getting opportunities in the outfield, it was because of that. He could still do that. But he's actually come back to life in terms of being a hitter this year. So it's a nice bounce back for Pham. I like getting him into Met stacks when I build him. I just don't know how many Met stacks I need in this spot. On the other side, the Dodgers going up against Verlander. Like I said, that's the limiting factor for Verlander shares. He's more in play at 8,000 on the DK slate. 9,200 is starting to push it on FanDuel. He's not been that version of Justin Verlander. He's also not been completely tragic. He was better in his most recent 3 starts than he had been earlier in the season, if I'm remembering correctly. Not that we want to chase box scores by any means. Let's see. I know I broke this down. Hold on. Yeah. So not that we want to go box score hunting, but I think when we look at the entire full season for a guy who's, kind of gotten the reputation of, he's probably shot. He's not the guy he was, blah, blah, blah. He gave up more than 4 runs once. A 6-run disaster on May 16th against the Rays. Of all teams, it's against the Rays. They've been scoring 6 runs on basically everybody. Outside of that, he's given up 4 runs twice. And then he's been at 2 runs or fewer in all 9 of his other starts. So it's not like Verlander's been a total disaster on the mound by any stretch of the imagination. A 3.60 ERA, a 4.43 xFIP, 19.7% strikeouts. The strikeouts have dipped badly. That's a major difference in what he's done this year, and I think that's what costs him here and costs him the opportunity to be in any lineups against the low strikeout Dodgers, is if he's just pitching okay and striking out guys at a 25% clip, I think you can get to him. Below 20 going up against a lineup that sits like right at 20 with most of their best hitters below 20, it's just a tough proposition for Verlander shares, particularly at the FanDuel price. So I don't know how much I get to him, but I think he's viable. I don't think it's necessarily a mistake to play him on DK. You just wish for a better matchup. Brutal matchup here. Betts, Freeman, Smith, Muncy, Martinez. All 5 of those guys are playable in Dodger stacks. Not a great spot for Dodger stacks either, though. They're totaled at 4.48. They're favored in the game. But if you think about it, I mean, it's Verlander. Even when we're talking about the bad version of Verlander, what do we get? 4 to 6 runs? That's most likely what he's going to give up here. So I don't really see the Dodgers going out and tattooing him. I just think they kind of limit his opportunity the same way that he limits their opportunity. So I don't love the Dodgers. I might get to some, but they're really pricey. So if I'm looking to, make my way to a team because they're pricey and I have to, figure out how to get there or put them together with a low-end value stack or just a super popular like Yankees value stack maybe. I don't know how those fit together, but maybe. It's just not great for a team like I'm going to do all that work to get to a team going up against Justin Verlander. I don't love it. So some Dodgers, but not much. I really like those bottom 3 lefty outfielder veterans, David Peralta, Jason Hayward, James Outman. Any one of those guys helps to differentiate a lineup. All 3 of them are cheap. All 3 of them do roughly the same thing in terms of having decent left-handed power infrequently in the outfield at cheap prices. Outman's probably the best performer of the bunch, but obviously Peralta and Hayward have much more experience, much more acumen for their hit tools in kind of descending order. Peralta's got the best hit tool, then Hayward, then Outman, but it reverses for power. Peralta's got the least power, Hayward, then Outman. So you take him in that kind of a mix and match approach. That's about it for this one. So shares of both pitchers in minor degrees. More safety probably in Urias. Probably not a great ceiling on Verlander. I think I talked through that enough that you guys get my take on Verlander. Similar take on the Dodgers, just not a great spot for them despite being a very, very good team, especially with how they're priced. And then the Mets, I take or leave the Mets here. You need to get the bad version of Urias. So really this is one of those four corners potential ones. Probably I would prefer hitting on both sides to pitching. I know I'm going back and forth on this. I think I've said that every way possible at this point. I'm kind of torn. Let me try and rank this. I think I got us. All right. I know I just said I would probably prefer hitting, but let me go. Oh, isn't Urias is capped for innings, isn't he? Is he? No, I'm thinking of somebody else. I'll go Urias, Mets bats, Dodgers bats, Verlander. All of them are in play. All of them can be left on the table. That's how we're running that one up. What is going on with this mouse? It's like somebody else is trying to control this mouse. It's like moving or not responding to what I want it to do. It's weird. Podija and Stoner's in the chat. What's going on? Chuck says the hitting weather is premium in city. Yeah, it's certainly muggy here. I'll give it that. I got some back sweat going on right now. It gets warm in this room. The air conditioner's in the other room. I just have a window unit in the apartment here. But it gets warm in this room, particularly if the computer starts grinding on anything. Like when I'm crunching lineups, forget it. Chuck's electronics are all acting like that right now. Trey says it's the battery. Yeah, I think it's the battery. This still has the Bob's battery company battery that came with the mouse when I bought the wireless mouse. So it probably just needs a good Duracell Energizer. Duracell, brought to you by the Copper Top today. No, Energizer. Get that little pink bunny to go across the screen. They still have him? I think they do. Stephen Leibowitz says best stacks are big money. You got choices to make to get there. Yeah, a lot of expensive spots, and then the Yanks super affordable. I think the world is going to be on the Yankees in Coors Field today, so you got to make that decision too. Solar flares. This may be our last slate before you see the White Throne. What's that from? White Throne, I don't know. It's a reference. You got me on that reference. I did just rewatch that X-Men Dark Phoenix yesterday. Days of Future Past was on. Days of Future Past is really good. And then I was like, well, maybe that Apocalypse movie wasn't as bad as I remember it. Let me check that out. And I watched it, and it was all right. You know, it was better than I remembered it. I'll give it that much, but definitely flawed. Oscar Isaac, not a great Apocalypse. He's got his complaints about that role and how it was explained to him versus what the reality was about not being able to act under 40 pounds of rubber and everything. And then I went from that one into maybe Dark Phoenix wasn't as bad. Yeah, that one was just as bad as I remembered it. So the reason I got to that was because they thought that the Phoenix Force was a solar flare in the beginning of that movie. Biblical. Oh, White Throne of God. Biblical reference. Got it. I didn't know God had a white throne. I know the Iron Throne. I know not a lot of famous thrones. The Iron Throne is probably the most famous throne I can think of. And all the other examples are from Game of Thrones. So I'll throw the White Throne of God onto the pile there. All right, cool. Dark Phoenix didn't make any damn sense. Yeah, I agree with that. The comic story makes, some sense. What's also weird is that they gave the same screenwriter who wrote Last Stand, which was an adaptation of the Dark Phoenix story and an even worse one, Simon Kinberg, who wrote most of those X-Men movies. They gave him the opportunity to write it again and to direct it this time. Didn't work out. Strange decision. EMP, yeah, an electromagnetic pulse. Short burst of energy that can affect electronics. Happens after a nuclear blast, or in sci-fi movies with a little whirring device when they need a convenient power outage. Anyway, why don't we jump back into this slate? Brewers against the Reds. Corbin Burns, Graham Ashcraft. I think you can fire away with the Brewers. They're a flawed lineup, but at least they're very cheap. I think this will be one of the more popular sources of value on today's slate. You can see all the really, really low prices. Going up against Ashcraft, it's kind of obvious why. 16.4% strikeouts, 9.4% walks, 3.49% home runs, a 6.28 ERA, a 4.78 xFIP. There's no reason to sit here and try and defend Graham Ashcraft. I don't really understand why he costs $8,100 on FanDuel. If you want to roll the dice at $5,100 on DK, you are probably making a mistake. I will tell you that. Don't like the spot here in Cincinnati's bandbox. Don't like the opportunity to go up against even a flawed Brewers lineup here. So no Graham Ashcraft for me. Corbin Burns is the interesting one. Another pitcher who's certainly declined significantly this year. 23.1% strikeouts. That's down like 7-8 points from last year in the low 30s. Down to more 12 or more points from like 35% 2 years ago. But still not terrible. 3.94 ERA, 4.17 xFIP. Has pitched deep into a few games. Has provided good starts for DFS purposes. 6.4% barrel rate, 3.17% home runs, only 33.1% hard hits. So even this, which is a fairly low, respectable home run rate, is probably a little high given the 86 miles an hour of exit velo, 33% hard hits, and 6.4% barrels. This is still just a few, there's a couple additional home runs in here that probably shouldn't be. What's going on with the strikeouts has been a lot to do with the pitch mix. We've looked at that recently. I still like Corbin Burns to eventually figure it out here. I just don't love the conditions in this game. I like the $8,400 price on DK. I think you can play that. I don't love the $9,600 on FanDuel, but I expect it renders him almost completely unowned against a team that will probably be a little bit popular here. So I think I'll have a few shares. He projects out okay enough. He's on that plateau with everybody else. For the pricing and the lack of popularity, I think it's good enough. That said, I definitely want to get to some red stacks on the other side. They're also a good value team. They're not a great value team. They were, where were they in terms of the pricing overall here? They're a good projection team. 4th overall by projections. Mid-board on FanDuel value. 13th out of 28 teams on FanDuel value. 21st by DK value. That's why they fell off. And not great home run marks against Corbin Burns, given his acumen for limiting home runs. So really, we're looking for the Reds to sequence. We're looking for the Reds to use their ridiculous speed, their stolen base upside. You can see this entire team runs. This entire team hits for at least a little bit of power. They've got good on-base numbers. So I like them for sequencing. I like them for getting on base. If they knock one out of the park, so much the better. We're getting to shares of TJ Friedl, Matt McClain, Jake Fraley, Ellie De La Cruz, Jonathan India. Interesting spot for India, dropping to 5th in the lineup with Fraley climbing to 3rd. Going up against the righty, you get Jake Fraley's lefty power up there. So I like that spot for Fraley. 11 homers, 16 stolen bases on the year. Nice little season for Jake Fraley so far. Remains very cheap, $4,700, $3,400. That's very playable, particularly on DK. That's a great price for that bat on DK, especially if you're talking about the other guys that you want to get to on this team being a little bit priced up. Guys like Ellie at 63. Obviously, you need to save somewhere else to get to Ellie. Multi-position on Spencer Steer, Ellie, and Matt McClain. Like that quite a bit. Joey Votto lurking in the middle of the lineup at cheap prices with all his power, or cheap on DK anyway, not so much on FanDuel. 7 home runs in 67 plate appearances for Joey Votto, a 404 ISO. Ridiculous start to his season. Obviously, that's not going to continue, but we know Joey's got power. We know he can put bat on ball. So for this team, it's 1 through 7. You can mix in some Tyler Stevenson on DK where you need catchers. Don't really care that much about Stevenson, Will Benson, but Benson's been fine. 291, 385, 496, a 205 ISO, 4 home runs, 7 stolen bases, and 135 plate appearances. It's not like you need to leave him off out of your plans. So I like going to the Reds quite a bit here. Not a great matchup against Burns, so I'll kind of temper my expectations, but they project out pretty well. And I like the spot, like the conditions in this ballpark. On the Brewers side of things, you can definitely attack Graham Ashcraft, like I started this game out saying. Christian Yelich having an underrated season, 11 home runs, 21 stolen bases, 27% better than average creating runs. He's not going to hit 40 home runs anymore. That's not who he is, but he still hits everything hard. He still gets on base. He still creates runs. He steals. He only costs $4,600, $3,700. Great buy to start out a Brewer stack. William Contreras, fine, good catcher, 47.3% hard hits, 9 home runs on the season, a 112 WRC+. Willy Adames basically only hits home runs, but he hits them. He hits them in bunches when he does. 13.8% barrels, 16 homers on the season, a 203 ISO. Owen Miller kind of miscast in the cleanup role. 3,400, 2,500, triple position eligibility on FanDuel, dual on DK. He's a usable piece in that spot, but he's not great for a cleanup hitter. 4 home runs, a 114 ISO. You want somebody with a little bit more pop in his bat there. Victor Caratini, a little bit of pop as a part-time catcher, 127 plate appearances, 5 home runs, 50.6% hard hits. I'd honestly even rather see Caratini hitting cleanup here. It's kind of a weird decision to have Owen Miller in that spot. Brian Anderson, Bryce Durang, Tyrone Taylor, Joey Weimer. Taylor's kind of interesting, 2,100, 1 home run, 4 steals on the season and 78 plate appearances, but he had a bunch of home runs just last year. 405 plate appearances, hit 17 sneaky home runs, hit 12 and 271 the year before. So maybe a sneaky power bat from late in the lineup for the dead minimum on DK, low price on FanDuel. I think you can get to shares of all these guys. Enthusiasm about these 3 in stacks of Brewers when I'm going there, and then you can get to some of these guys. These 2 belong with the top 3, and then you mix and match the bottom end basically. So it's like a 1 through 5 with mix and match parts available. But if this one gets carried away with popularity because of the spot, because of the matchup against Graham Ashcraft, the conditions, the ballpark, etc., I think I can leave them a little bit on the table, have some, but maybe get away from extended shares. Trey asks, how much stock do I put into Cincinnati, seeing him just last week? Not that much. It's something it's one of those things that falls into the bucket of probably something there but can't quantify. You know, like is there something to the idea that they've just seen him, they're familiar with where the ball's going to be coming at him, how it's going to be coming at him, etc. Yeah, there probably is a little bit to that, but I have no idea how to count it. And you would have to figure out how to count it for each individual pitcher individually, and then factor in things like how their stuff was working that day, where their velo was that day. It gets very, 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 very thin as you go down that road. So I wouldn't chase it. I think it just looks like a playable spot for them anyway. Miller has been their best offense this season, basically. Yeah, you're not wrong about that, Chuck. He is, got a 98 WRC plus now on the season, 4 home runs, 11 stolen bases, but he has been a catalyst for them, 285, 331. He's been productive for them, taking a little bit of a dip recently. But even with that, like with that run or 98 is below average for run creation, but one of the better marks on the team. Even with what he's done this season, just not what you would want from a cleanup hitter. Take him, stick him, like if you wanted to go Miller in the top 4, just slide everybody down by a spot, put him in the leadoff role ahead of Yelich. Not that you'd really want to do that, but I think Yelich would be better in the 2 spot than Miller would. So I probably would make that change. You could go Yelich, Miller, Contreras, Adames though if you wanted to, in a more traditional version of the lineup. Contreras is good with his on base too though. But yeah, it's a weird lineup, but they're cheap. They're multi-position eligible. There's talent there. There's home run upside for basically everybody in the lineup. There's speed upside for most of those guys. Like Weimer at the bottom of the lineup, 12 home runs, 11 stolen bases on the season. I mentioned Taylor's sneaky power upside. Caratini's got sneaky power upside as a backup catcher. Anderson was good at the beginning of the season, but it was really trailed off. KC Tampa. Oh yeah, we had that one. Thank you, Power. We had that one already. So let's make that the rule when it comes to news. Once it's been reported, and I know people come in and out don't always know, obviously, but let's try and temper the multiple reports, because especially if it's been a few minutes, like if it's a bunch at once when it happens, great. But if it's like 10 minutes later and then I see another one, I got to take that little pause to reset my brain and figure out whether we've talked about that or whether I need to cancel anything. But I do appreciate that, Power. All right, let's keep on rolling here. So this one is enthusiasm about the bats on both sides. I think you can get to a little bit of Corbin Burns. More interested in him on DK at 84. Can have some at 96. Probably going to keep the ownership low for him on the FanDuel slate. We know he's got amazing upside. So there's definitely a ceiling there. There's definitely a play there. Not sure how much I'll get to it in ratio with where the field is. It'll depend on public ownership projections. Let's keep on rolling here. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button out there. A lot of games left to talk about. White Sox and the Bravos. Michael Kopech. Charlie Morton. I think Charlie is very much in play going up against the White Sox, who have just really struggled this season. Projects really well for me. Having a Charlie Morton kind of a year, 26.1% strikeouts. Walks have climbed a little bit at 9.9%, but it's only like a point and a half up. 3.88 xFIP, 3.43 ERA, still a 12.8% swinging, 31.1% CSW. Charlie Morton's pitching like Charlie Morton. If you played him in years past, you can play him again this year. 9,000 on DK, 95 on FanDuel. Perfectly viable. Sits above the plateau with that other group of pitchers at a lower price than a lot of them in a good matchup. So I really like the spot here for Charlie. I really, really like the spot for Braves bats. Definite upside. They were on that list of teams that was totaled over 5, going up against Kopech. He's given up a 4.56% home run rate, 90 miles an hour of exit velo, a 14.2% barrel rate. He has struck out 26%. That's good, but he's walked 13.1%. That's very bad. 86 innings, 16 starts, not working deep into games, a 4.96 xFIP. Just a super targetable pitcher here. I think there is a very good reason. Tommy, postponed means canceled in baseball parlance. Means postponed until tomorrow. So Kopech, 8,500. Don't need him on DK. Totally unjustified price at 9,600 on FanDuel going up against the best lineup in baseball. I do not understand how they arrived at that. I would not have a single share of Michael Kopech in this spot against the Braves. They're very good at limiting strikeouts on top of everything else they do this year. 20.7% strikeout rate for this confirmed lineup. Just outrageously good. Why would you want to throw Michael Kopech into that buzzsaw? I don't get it, especially not at price. So yes to Charlie, enthusiastic yes to the Braves, no to Michael Kopech, and then maybe some mix and match like head shares against Charlie of White Sox bats. If we're going to break down the bats, Benintendi and Timmy have been really bad off the top of the lineup for Chicago this year. Benintendi's been a lot more productive. But they have one combined home run in how many plate appearances? 640 plate appearances? 640 plate appearances, one combined home run, 18 combined stolen bases. Just not been pretty. Tim Anderson sitting all that way below average, 57% below average for runs. Where have you gone, Timmy? 2,600 on the FanDuel slate. He's playable. 4,200 on DK. He's probably still a little high for what he's done this year. We know that's an all-star caliber player. A 300 hitter with 20 home run power, 30 stolen base speed. Tim Anderson's a very, very good player when he's going right. He's just not gone right at all this season. Luis Robert back in the lineup after coming up a little bit gimpy in the home run derby with a calf issue. 6,000, 4,000. Totally worth paying for. 26 home runs, 298 ISO. Eloy Jimenez, Andrew Vaughn, Jake Berger. Those are your power bats down through the lineup there. Jasmine Grandal mixed in at 2,900, 2,300 as a cheap catcher is playable. Oscar Colas, definitely playable at 2,100, 2,000. Power bat, minor league prospect. Brought him up to start the year, kind of struggled. Sent down, came back up, 102 plate appearances. Hasn't done much yet, but there's talent there, and he's very, very cheap. So limited interest in White Sox stacks, but I think they're an interesting lineup when you start building those stacks. Like I like the pieces within the White Sox stack better than I like the full version of the stack going up against Morton. Not saying like grab only one-offs. Just kind of saying like the total is not the sum of its parts, I guess. In a clunky way to put that. Dennis says, hey, that's only one more home run than you and I have combined this year. That's a very good point, Den. Very good point. We rival the output for Tim Anderson and Andrew Benintendi, and we're both tied with Tim Anderson for home runs this year. Not bad. The Braves, 1 through 9. We talked about them quite a bit this year. This is the everyday version of the lineup. They play from 1 through 9. They will soon have 8 of 9 hitters in the everyday lineup at more than 10 home runs. Right now, 7 of them have more than 14 home runs. Acuna is expensive but worth it. Ozzy Albies is the home run pick for the day at 56, 4,000 at second base. Totally worth it. Austin Riley, slumping, 4,900, 3,600. Get him while he's cheap. He's going to come roaring back in the second half. He's going to hit 30 home runs this year. He's not exactly off pace at 16. A little bit below what he's done in years past. 181 ISO. He's going to hit 30 home runs this year. Matt Olson is going to hit 50 home runs, 60. He's at 29 in 400 plate appearances. 50's easily in reach. We'll see about beyond that. But Olson's a deadly good power hitter. Sean Murphy's just a ridiculously good catcher. 17 home runs, 306, 400, 599, a 293 ISO. When you talk to A's fans, make sure to pat them on the back and tell them that everything's going to be all right despite their team sending these guys out and then selling off the rest of the franchise for parts and moving to Las Vegas. You wonder why your fans hate you, Oakland. This is part of the reason. Two ridiculously talented players. Marcell Ozuna, Eddie Rosario roared back to life this season. 17 home runs for Ozuna, 14 for Rosario, a 112 WRC plus, a 106 WRC plus. Just reminding everybody how good they are. These are guys who would be, 3 and 4 hitters in a lot of other lineups. Just excellent outfielders, cheap prices. Orlando Arcia, an all-star, 2,800, 3-position eligible on FanDuel. He's come back to earth a little bit in recent weeks, but still a very, very good utility man type of a play on the FanDuel slate. 3,900, a totally viable shortstop on DK. And then Michael Harris Jr. at 4,134. Just absolute excellent option in the 9 spot. Trey says, who wins MVP if Arias hits 400 or close to? And Acuna goes 40-80. It's... Yeah, not Lacuna either. I think it's Acuna. I don't think Arias has the juice to get there. There's a lot of people who nitpick his game. If the Marlins came stampeding through the second half, made the playoffs, had a great run, maybe, and he hit 400, maybe there's an argument to be made. But just the way that those awards work and that the voting works and everything, I think it's Acuna with a bullet. The A's are now pitching Waldichuk tonight. As an opener? It's probably as an opener, Steve. He's been working in relief lately. So I would imagine probably, maybe a 2-3 inning opener, but probably as an opener. So this one was tons of enthusiasm about the Braves bats. I like Charlie Morton quite a bit here. I'll have a lot of them. Limited interest in the White Sox bats. No interest in Michael Kopech. Let's keep moving. Guardians, Rangers. Good spot here. Take some shares of John Gray. 8,300. I'm looking at too many things. 518. Okay. 518, plenty of time. John Gray, 8,300, 8,900. I like that price for this pitcher. He's on the plateau. 27 in the FanDuel projection. Just puts him right in line with those other guys. But if he's going to come in cheaper than some of those other options, I like this spot for him. Going up against a weak Guardians lineup that we've kind of been targeting. Not a premium target given their ability to limit strikeouts, but given their complete struggles with run creation, with sequencing, with hitting for power this year, they've been at least on the board for pitchers like John Gray, who aren't necessarily high strikeout guys anyway, who can find their way to clean innings, find his 4 or 5 strikeouts along the way, like they typically give up. So I think there's good opportunity here for John Gray at price. It's not one to get overly carried away with, but there's a spot here for John Gray to succeed at these numbers. So I'll have some John Gray. 20.1% strikeouts on the year, a 4.48 xFIP, a 3.29 ERA, only 2.94% home runs. At the very worst, I think we're going to get some clean innings out of him. 5.6, quality start, good shot at a win bonus here. Maybe upside to, beyond 6 innings. Who knows? There's good potential for John Gray. He's got to find the strikeouts along the way, but I think he will. That's what the Guardians are good at. They're not good at much of anything else. Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor are the 2 good hitters in that lineup. 14 home runs for Ramirez, 11 for Naylor, 132 WRC plus, 123 WRC plus. Only 2 guys above average for run creation in this lineup. You get struggling hitters like Steven Kwan, Ahmed Rosario, Andres Jimenez. All 3 of those guys well below what we thought their output would be this year. Kind of, not tragically below average for run creation for Kwan and Jimenez. Rosario a little bit more off the pace at 13% below, but just none of those guys really hitting for the power. Rosario and Jimenez not hitting for the power that we thought they would. None of those guys getting on base or creating runs at the clip we thought they would. They're all cheap. They're easy enough to get to, but I just don't love it against a pitcher that I think is talented enough in Gray here. Josh Bell, similar story, really underperforming this year. Does have power, hits from both sides, 2,600, 2,800. I wouldn't begrudge anybody shares of John Gray at first base, but I don't love the spot. And then Brennan, Miles Straub, Bo Naylor, kind of a weak bottom third. Fire away with Texas shares. A lot of pop-ups going on over here. Fire away with Texas shares. Sammy Seager, Nathaniel Lowe, Adolis Garcia, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Ezekiel Duran, loaded Taveras from the bottom. Even Travis Jankowski at 3,000, 2,500. Jankowski in 153 plate appearances, 321, 414, 420, creating runs 40% better than average for Travis Jankowski with 11 stolen bases. Team's been rolling. I know they slumped a little bit. Them and the Rays, both 3-7 in the last 10 coming into the break. I don't really care. I like Savali, but not for this game, not for DFS purposes today. He's a guy I'll get to in the right spots. This just doesn't look like that spot. 7,300, 8,800. Definitely more likely to come in and only give up 4 or 5. Pitch an okay game, but not a DFS relevant game. Maybe he has a limiting impact on the Rangers. I kind of lean toward the Rangers side of things. They're showing a little bit of power in the model. That's just their day-to-day power, really, because Savali doesn't give up a lot. 4.6% home runs, 33.8% hard hits this year. Only 1.88% home runs for Savali this year. 3.44% last year on 40% hard hits. Year before, 39% hard hits, 4.62% home runs. Maybe a little bit more targetable for power than what he looks like this season. I think I'm taking my shots where I take them on Rangers stacks, but maybe I don't get overly carried away with them. They look good, not great, maybe. Kind of like a mid-level priority play. That's with a 4.38 run total. So when you think about the Rangers, everything they've done this year, think about Aaron Savali, you would expect to find them at a higher total, I think, or a lot of the public probably would. I think the total reflects the actual quality that Savali provides on the mound. It's just not leading to DFS shares for me for the pitcher. It might limit my exposure to the Texas stack, though. You can play it. They're expensive. It's another opportunity where, like, kind of like with the Dodgers, like if I pay through the nose, figure out how to get there. It's not Justin Verlander on the other side, but Savali's good enough at limiting run creation. So I don't love the spot, but I will probably get to Texas and probably more enthusiastic about Texas than I am about the Dodgers going up against Verlander. So this one for me, no real love for Savali, given the matchup here. More playable for sure on DK, by the way, at 7,300. That's not off the board. Even against Texas, you could play Savali at 73. 88 on FanDuel, I just don't need to get there. And with that big plateau of pitchers at similar prices, I don't know that you want to go there on DK. Just why tangle with the Rangers? And especially why do it with a low strikeout guy? Like if you could tell me that I could get a 30+% strikeout guy if I go up against the Rangers at low ownership at that price, then I'm more intrigued. Savali at that price, it's just not the right spot. If he was going up against like the Royals, it would be a much, much more interesting spot. We succeeded with that spot recently. So no real love for the Guardians, no real love for Savali. Enthusiasm about the Rangers stack to some degree, just based on their price. It's a mid priority stack for me. And then decent amount of interest in John Gray. It depends where he falls, depends what the field is going to do with him, but I kind of like him in this spot. Boston, Chicago. Nothing new in the... Yeah, Chuck, I like that spot for Paul Blackburn as well. We'll take a look in a sec. So let's see. Red Sox, Chicago. Got the confirmed lineup for the Cubbies. I think it's this exact same one, but let me drop it in here real quick while I talk. Or while I take a second to catch my breath and shut up. Yep, looks like the same lineup. All right. Interesting spot here for Brian Bayo. 7,700 to 8,500. Projects pretty well for me. Can't imagine he's going to be overly popular. This was a spot the wind was blowing out in Chicago last I looked, but not at crazy rates, crazy miles an hour. So I think it's playable enough for a guy who typically keeps the ball down, checks home run power anyway. It's the kind of guy you want in a situation where the wind's blowing out. People might be expecting a little bit of home run potential. So I kind of maybe want to get to some shares of Bayo. He's more interesting at 7,700 on the DK slate. 85, playable enough on FanDuel. 3.04 ERA, 3.93 xFIP, a 20.8% strikeout rate, 6.5% walks, 6.1 degree average launch angle, and a 2.38% home run rate. Those last two numbers are really what I'm targeting him for. But the 11.2% swinging strike shows a little bit of acumen for finding some strikeouts. The Cubbies can contribute strikeouts toward an opposing pitcher, 24.2% strikeout rate for this confirmed lineup. And they haven't really been rolling in terms of run creation, in terms of power upside. They sequence more than they hit for power. There are a few good on-base percentages in here, which is what I like about going to the Cubs. But they're a fairly non-threatening bunch with a handful of strikeouts in there against a guy who limits power potential. So there's an argument to be made, at least, for getting to shares of Bayo. I don't really want to get to too many shares of Cubs, particularly if they gain a little ground based on low pricing, based on the idea that the wind's blowing out. I don't need the Cubs that badly in this spot. Mike Tauchman has really kind of come back to earth after they moved him up to this leadoff spot. He's a quad A talent, not a major league hitter overall. 2,928. If you're building a ton of Cub stacks, you can go there, but it's not great. Nico, 4,700, 3,300, 5 home runs, 20 stolen bases, but only a 321 on base, only a 91 WRC plus. Not really doing what you would want from a leadoff guy, a guy to set the table in front of guys like Ian Happ, Seiya Suzuki, Cody Bellinger, Chris Morel. I kind of would rather see Happ, I think, in the leadoff role, given his excellent on-base percentage and good on-base skills over time. Like, Happ Horner wouldn't be bad. Horner Happ wouldn't be bad. Tauchman's just in the wrong spot, and Horner's not doing what you would want from somebody in that spot, given his speed and everything. He should be focused on getting on base a little bit more, stealing some bases, setting the table for guys behind him. Happ, Suzuki, Bellinger, and Morel is your power core. That said, it's not a great power core. 7 home runs each for Happ and Suzuki, 9 for Bellinger, but he's missed a lot of time, having a good season, a 193 ISO, 26% better than average creating runs, 9 homers, 11 stolen bases. And then Morel, 15 homers, but how much of it is really real? 306 ISO. He's a good hitter and good hitter for power, 15.3% barrel rate, 48.4% hard hits. But where does he finish the season after roaring out to that 15 home runs? He had like 10, 12 in his first 50 plate appearances. Has cooled since then. So he's not that hitter that we saw when he first came back to the lineup, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But a good, effective hitter if you're going to Cubs. Jared Young, Miles Mastroboni, Tucker Barnhart, kind of a meh bottom end. On the Sox side of things, you can definitely grab some Red Sox against Kyle Hendricks. I don't think we're breaking any extreme ground there. They're projected they were at 4.99 in the implied runs. That might have ticked up over 5 in recent updates. I'm not sure what the run total's done in this one. But going up against Hendo, it's a good spot. 14.9% strikeouts. He doesn't really issue too many free passes, doesn't get himself in a lot of trouble, doesn't give up a ton of home runs, but there's potential there. There's definitely enough talent to create runs, to sequence. They've got a few guys who can hit one out of the park. If I'm playing for wind, I'm probably playing the Red Sox bats over the Cubbies bats here. I'm looking for Duran, Masataka Yoshida, Justin Turner, Rafi Devers, Alex Verdugo, Adam Duvall, and Tristan Casas bring tons of power to the plate from both sides. I like the 1 through 7, and honestly, Connor Wong and Yu Chang are playable parts late in the lineup too. So this is a good Boston stack tonight. Yoshida's cheap, Turner's cheap for what they've done this season, 46 and 4,700 on the DK slate, 32-34 on FanDuel. 10 home runs for Yoshida, 13 for Turner, 139 WRC plus, 125 WRC plus. Jarren Duran's really cheap, but I think he'll get some attention in that leadoff spot in Red Sox stacks. 3,600, 3,100 for a guy 38% better in average creating runs, 5 homers, 17 steals, and 251 plate appearances. Too cheap. Way too cheap when he's leading off. Verdugo's good. 4,100, 3,400, 7 homers. Good on base guy. Reset the table in front of Duvall and Casas and all their power upside. I like that Red Sox lineup. I feel like I'm going to have a decent amount of Red Sox going up against Hendo in this spot. So this one was primarily Boston oriented. Good amount of Bayo. Good amount of Red Sox. Limited shares of the Cubbies with a focus like 3 through 6. I think would be the priority. Bolt on some Horner. Not great otherwise. No interest in Kyle Hendricks really. 5:30. Solid handful of games to go. This one we can skip though. Glad I didn't go deep into that game. I could have been sitting here talking about that game for like 10 minutes before jumping back into chat and then realizing that it was canceled. So I'm gonna go back in time and thank whoever that was. Power was the last person to mention KC was Tampa, and that's probably why it's stuck in the old noggin here. Let's see what else is going on in chat. Cleveland's getting a little ownership, like the gray spot. Yeah, I'm with you, Trey. I prefer gray to Cleveland there. For sure. And if they're getting popular, that erases most interest that I have in that lineup. Did Geloff make the confirmed A's lineup? He wasn't in the projected for reasons. I would expect, since they called him up, he's going to play. Soderstrom was in the projected. Soderstrom's their top prospect. He's got 20 home runs in AAA this year. Believe it's a PCL team, so factor that in. PCL league typically plays like Coors. So Soderstrom, it's we'll talk about it in just a sec. It's a stack that I don't love getting to shares of A's anyway, and I think I'm going to have a pretty good amount of Kanemada on the other side, so I don't know how much I'd get to it. But those two hitters do make this lineup a little bit better. Gelof, let me see what Gelof's done in the... Gelof's another one of their top prospects. He ranks 5th in the preseason reports over the course of 308 plate appearances in AAA this year, 12 homers, 20 steals. So that's an interesting player. 13% walks, 27.9% strikeouts, but a 224 ISO. Creating runs 22% better than average. So Gelof is also interesting. But let's look at this one real quick first, because I think there's an opportunity for the Cards, and I don't know how popular they're going to be. They're cheap for their talent. They're cheap for their upside. Going up against Mackenzie Gore. Gore started out the season really, really strongly. Still has a 27.8% strikeout rate, a 3.74 xFIP, but a 4.42 ERA has climbed. He's still walking 10.1%, and he started giving up tons and tons of premium contact. 11.3% barrels for the season now, 47.1% hard hits, a 3.61% home run rate that's kind of likely to climb if he continues all this stuff. 90.6 miles an hour of exit velo. I think there's good reason to attack Mackenzie Gore here with some of these Cardinals. Brendan Donovan in the leadoff spot typically doesn't hit leadoff against a lefty, but perfectly fine. 3,100, 2,900 is a correlated scoring play. You're just looking for him to get on base. Doesn't really matter what else he does. Lars Nootbaar hitting third. Obviously, this team is not intimidated by the fact that Mackenzie Gore's left-handed, because both of those guys usually drop in the lineup against the lefty. They've also got Nolan Gorman in the lineup against the lefty. So really, they're not showing any signs of worrying about Gore. They're kind of teeing up to get into the bullpen early here. I like this opportunity for the Cards. Goldschmidt and Arenado are stars, superstars, whatever we want to call them. 15 homers for Goldie, 19 for Arenado. After his ridiculously cold start, he came just roaring back to life this season. You play both of those guys, you bolt on all the other pieces around them. Wilson Contreras is viable. Jordan Walker's viable. Nolan Gorman, Paul DeJong, Dylan Carlson. 1 through 9, this is a viable lineup. I would mostly want to build around Goldie and Arenado and use just like all of those pieces. But if you wanted to skip one of those guys and just go like Donovan, Goldie, Nootbaar, Contreras, Walker, or like Nootbaar, Arenado, Walker, Gorman as a FanDuel stack, there's a lot of different ways to play this. I like this lineup quite a bit. It's burnt me a lot. I'm one of, I think, guns with me on that ship, that we get to the Cards a lot more than other teams for reasons. It's been successful, been a failure in alternating spots this year, but I like this opportunity going up against all that contact that Gore's given up here. On the other side, Miles McCollum going up against the Nats. And by the way, Gore, may be viable. He does project out okay. Certainly at or above that plateau for 7,000, 8,400. He's not off the board. Still 27.8% strikeout rate. You need to have the good day. But he's not off the board, especially at that DK price. I like the opportunity for Gore on DK at price, but I think the Cards win the day. For Michaelis, 7,500, 7,000. Those are pretty good value prices going up against a Nationals team that we've been kind of targeting all year long. When it's Michaelis, I don't really care that they limit strikeouts because he didn't really strike out that many people anyway. I'm just looking for 7 clean innings. Give me 7 shutout innings. Give me a good shot at a win, quality start. Let me ride those bonuses. For those prices, I think that's viable. 75 on DK is in play. 7,000 on FanDuel if you're forgoing all the top options and all the big ticket items. I think he's viable at 7,000. That's a very strong discount for a pitcher on the FanDuel slate. And we've seen guys succeed at those numbers all season long on FanDuel. It's just a matter of getting to those bonuses, finding me some clean innings. If he picks up a few additional strikeouts along the way, so much the better. Going up against a lineup that's much better against lefties. It has Lane Thomas in it. He's been good this year. 302, 347, 497, 126 WRC plus, 14 homers. Emer Candelario, the only other hitter above average for run creation in this lineup this year. 13 homers on the season. I think 10 of them are against righties, so more dangerous on this side of splits. But then after that, Joey Meneses hit 2 or 3 home runs in the last week coming into the All-Star break. Has been good for a hit tool this year, but not really for run creation, not really for power overall. Keibert Ruiz, I believe there's power coming, but kind of it's still a low-end option. 9 home runs on the season, but 226, 279, 360, a 72 WRC plus. He's a catcher, so you forgive the lack of offense overall, but we don't love that hitting 5th in a lineup for DFS purposes. Dom Smith, Corey Dickerson, Luis Garcia, Alex Call. It's not a good lineup. So I think you could take some Michaelis shares. Very limited, if any, interest in Nationals. It would probably be like Abrams, Thomas, Candelario, Meneses, and thank you very much. If you're on DK, throw Keibert Ruiz into that mix. Thank you very much. That's about it. So a lot of enthusiasm for card stacks. Good interest in Michaelis as a value option. Less interest in Mackenzie Gore, but I think he's at least on the board for 500 cheaper on the DK slate as a value option. Not really on the board at 84 for me on the FanDuel slate. I don't really see that path. Significant interest in all things cards. No real interest in Nats. Minor interest in their pitcher. Coors Field. We can pick up a little ground on this one. 537. We're doing okay time-wise. Aiming to get off around 6. DK is showing Trevor Williams is pitching for the Nats. MLB has a TBD. MLB has Trevor Williams now. That's even better for the Cards, as Stephen Leibowitz says. All right, that's a surprise. So anything I said about potentially playing Gore, just scratch out when it comes to Trevor Williams and add 10-15% to expectations for the Cards. That becomes a very good spot for the Cardinals. Let me see if there's a good way that I can show that. Monty, Luis Garcia is just showing the pitcher viability eligibility because there's a pitcher named Luis Garcia. Was that on the DK side? Yeah, that's only on there's a pitcher on the Astros named Luis Garcia, and there's no designation to separate their names. I took it out on FanDuel so that he would show it his correct price on and second base, but I forgot to do it on the DK slate. It's one that I sometimes remember, sometimes don't, but it's a player that I never really like, so I don't really mind that much. And you can see it screws up projections because he doesn't come through the model correctly. There you go. Now he's a $3,100 second baseman. See, just minor change. So it's just a matter of the naming convention in there, and there's no good way to solve that, Monty. Trey says Even Labs has Williams now. All right, cool. So let's actually, instead of that, let me show you guys this. All right, so look where the Cards are now. And let me see if I can quickly change this up to Trevor Williams. We're going to use just all of Williams' career numbers instead of the more recent sample that I typically use, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Mackenzie Gore. You know what's funny? I think I actually did change this morning. I think it was Trevor Williams this morning now that I'm remembering it. And now look where the Cards are. So home runs spiked a little bit. These projections, I promise, all moved up a little bit as well. So the power went up. Williams is a non-option, 5,500, 7,000. It's 17% strikeouts, a 4.95 xFIP, a 4.49% home run rate on 39.2% hard hits, 10.3% barrels. Giving up fewer barrels than Mackenzie Gore, but overall not the pitcher that Mackenzie Gore is. Obviously a 10% difference in strikeout rate. Fire away with Cards bats. Enthusiasm about Cards bats. All right, back to this one. I've touched on this a number of times. Yankees are going to be super popular at Coors Field today. I don't think there's anything we can do about it. Going up against Austin Gomber, who does not project well for me, does not show viability for me. It's a Coors Field game. It's a struggling version of the Yanks. They're not that great anyway. With no Aaron Judge in the lineup, there's obvious potential for a lot of pitchers going up against them, but Coors Field, Austin Gomber, bad combination of factors, a team that I'm going to want to get to at the plate. I don't like saying, there's a team that's going to be super popular, so let's attack them with the pitcher. In general, this could be in the biggest pitcher's park in the league, and I still wouldn't necessarily be interested in Austin Gomber just because the Yankees were going to be popular. add on that he's not good, add on that it's at Coors Field. There's just really, really limited opportunity here for Austin Gomber. I know that he did succeed that one time that we talked about him. It was like his one good start all year. I'm going to give him that one. I don't think he's going to do it again today. Out of all the teams in the league to go out and shock the world with an awesome start at Coors Field, are the Yankees on the list of teams that he is somewhat likely to do that against? Probably, just because they're going to be the Yankees and they're annoying for DFS purposes, especially when they get popular. I just don't see it, and I certainly don't want to include it in my lineups. I don't want to put money on it. Let's put it that way. So Gomber's a no for me, and I think I feel the same way about Carlos Rodon. I feel like we're getting an 80-ish pitch count for Rodon here. 8,500, 9,300. He went 5 1/3 in that first outing, but it was a really limited appearance in terms of his strikeout upside. He went 5 1/3, struck out 2, walked 2, allowed 2 runs on 4 hits, including a home run. Went into the 6th, but it was a pretty limited pitch count night. So I expect he's going to be fairly limited again here in terms of his pitch count, and then you get the additional limiting factor of Coors Field on top of that. So really for me, even at price, I love the matchup against the Rockies. He projects okay even with Coors, like this includes the Coors Field of it all, and you can see that he's on the plateau with everybody else. I just don't love it, and I don't know that that's an accurate reflection of what his pitch count looks like, which I'm just gonna cheat real quick here. Let's see where these guys have him pitch count wise. Yeah, they agree with me. RG agrees with me. They've got him at 82 pitches. I was saying around 80. I don't really see it. It's a very, very thin path to success, I think, for Carlos Rodon. Obviously, you're talking about a great strikeout pitcher when he's going right. But just thinking in terms of just coming back, limited pitch count, Coors Field, especially at 93 on FanDuel, doesn't feel right. Could succeed. Like it a little bit better at 85 on DK. But it's not great. We're talking about a pitcher at Coors Field. Fire away with Yankees bats. Volpe, Torres. Do we have the Yankees lineup? No. Volpe, Glaber, Stanton, Rizzo, Bader, Donaldson. All of those guys easily playable up top. DJ's had a really weird year. Projected to hit 7th. We'll see where he lands in the lineup. 3 positions on FanDuel, 2 positions on DK. Just on who he's been over time. At Coors Field, knowing that it's at Coors Field, definitely in play. I wouldn't take him out of my stacks by any means, but he's been bad. 220, 285, 357, 137 ISO, 78 WRC plus. Not what the Yankees paid for when they signed DJ LeMahieu. IKF, Jose Trevino, low-end options at the bottom of the lineup. I'd rather see 2 other guys in those spots. We'll see what we get. Higgy is the better of the 2 Yankees catchers when it comes to hitting. Trevino is the better 2 of the Yankees catchers when it comes to defense. Who knows? Top of the lineup, Stanton is very cheap for his upside at 5,000, 3,100. 9 homers on the season at 223 ISO, despite really not having his timing so far. We saw him blast 2 home runs the other day before the break. Hopefully the break didn't set him back again. It's Stanton's one of these hitters who tends to hit in bunches. Hot and cold don't really exist, but they sort of do. Stanton's one of those guys. Anthony Rizzo, 4,800, 3,100. Slumped badly in terms of the hit tool, what we typically expect from Rizzo. But at those prices at Coors Field, you can definitely get him. 43.32 for Bader. Great pricing in the outfield for a guy with a little bit of pop, a little bit of speed. Definitely can get to shares of Bader. Volpe, I've talked about preferring later in the lineup right now. Perfectly fine hitting leadoff, but just hasn't gotten the job done in that spot yet. That's not predictive by any means. If he's hitting leadoff, you roster him. If he's hitting 9th, you roster him. 4,000, 3,000. Good counting stat upside. Coors Field game from a shortstop. Kind of a no-brainer. The Rockies side going up against Rodon is very, very limiting for them. They'll be by far the lower-owned team. They're very affordable. There is minor potential, but you lose, Ryan McMahon loses most of his quality lefty-lefty. Jurickson Profar sucks off the top of the lineup. So we're already dealing with like a 7-man lineup. Not that McMahon's totally inept against lefties, but the power disappears fairly aggressively. 14 home runs at 211 ISO overall. You're playing him for the bullpen plate appearances. Elias Diaz, the hero from the All-Star game, 4,100, 2,800, 9 homers on the season that count. The one big knock that didn't count in the All-Star game. Playable, kind of miscast as a cleanup hitter. CJ Cron, probably more of a cleanup hitter, or, actually technically probably a 5-6 hitter, but on this team, probably the cleanup hitter. 3,900, 2,900, 7 home runs in 185 plate appearances. Cron's a premium power bat. Doesn't do a ton else at the plate. 14.8% barrels. If I'm going to Rockies, I'm certainly including CJ Cron, but I'm not like going out of my way to get to Rockies or to get to CJ Cron in general. Grichuk, Tovar, Trejo, Doyle, playable parts, mix and match sense from the bottom of the lineup. Rockies not a great option here. So this one, Coors Field game, fire away with the bats. If you're crazy and you want to go value at pitcher, 5,500 for Austin Gomber, I guess you can do it on the DK slate if you believe more than I do. I certainly don't. I would not do it. Carlos Rodon, similar story, only playable on DK in my mind, but not really a good-looking spot with 80 pitches on deck. Because if he's finding it, the reason that's a limiting factor for him, if he goes out and has a good strikeout game, say he finds 5-6 strikeouts along the way, that's already racking up those pitches, right? We're building up that pitch count quickly with the strikeouts. So if he pitches well, he's self-limiting. If he pitches just okay, he's not going to give you the score that you need even at price. It's just a limited opportunity. So significant interest in Yankees bats, but they'll be very, very popular. Put them together with lesser owned teams. Find ways to put them together with high priced teams that are less popular, like maybe the Cardinals and Yankees is a good combination. Maybe we're getting to those guys with a bit of pitching potential. The Yankees and Braves with a value pitcher is a killer combination. Not to spoil it, but that's actually my placeholder on FanDuel right now. Hoping that the pitcher goes a little undervalued. So yeah, significant interest in the Yanks. Very limited interest in Rockies bats as usual, but it is a Coors Field game. 3 games to go. Astros and the Angels. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Dennis says, I think the Yanks lineup, it's not up on Schmabs, Den. So I don't have it. Chuck says the site he uses loves Red Dawn. I'm so curious what that would be based on. I don't know if you're referring to Stochastic or one of the other sites. I'd be surprised if Stochastic does. Typically, they run a lot through pitch count. Doesn't look like RG likes him a little bit better than I do, but it doesn't look like he's a tremendous option on their board. He's at, he's like a point or two higher than I've got him. Yeah, 82 pitches is your limiting factor there. I'm surprised if anybody's really pushing hard on Carlos Rodon. He could go out and have a 6-7 strikeout game, give you 5 clean innings, maybe book a win. So if you're looking for that kind of a performance, maybe. That's too thin for me on FanDuel. Maybe it gets you there on DK, but it's not great. I'm surprised. All right, let's get into this one. Coming up on 5:48. Definitely going to need to build some lineups for this slate. Angels bats. Oh, this. All right, let me start here. Shohei Ohtani is an outfielder on the FanDuel slate. He is not a $4,500 pitcher on the FanDuel slate. He's going to accrue points only as a hitter on FanDuel. So if you have him in your lineups, he will not accrue pitching points today. You cannot put him at pitcher on FanDuel and accrue hitting points. Doesn't work that way. So he's only an outfielder on FanDuel. Conversely, he's only a pitcher on DK. 10,900 on the DK slate. He's a pitcher. He's not an outfielder. He's not in lineups. So getting him at pitcher, I think, is probably the more valuable of these two potential options. I think at 10.9, that's a very pretty price to pay, but I think he's got a lot of upside. He projects really, really well going up against the Astros. 32.4% strikeout rate is the best on the slate. 103rd innings, 17 starts, a 3.51 xFIP, 3.32 ERA. We know he's walked a few too many this season, but it hasn't really cost him. 13.2% swinging strike rate is outrageously good. 3.44% home runs. He's given up a couple long balls, but again, hasn't really cost him. Hasn't done too much damage. And significant upside for pitching against this struggling Astros team. Not a good version of the Astros lineup. Let me see if we got the confirmed. We do not. Assuming this is the version of the Astros lineup, I really don't want to get into too many shares of them. Kyle Tucker, Jose Abreu, Alex Bregman, maybe as a 3-man from the middle, or maybe I'm leaving Abreu off and going to either Jainer Diaz or Chas McCormick there. I don't like Dubon as a leadoff hitter. I really like these two guys. I like this guy, kind of like that guy. If this guy's really actually back to life, he's fine, but it's not great. Limited interest in the Astros stack. They're not expensive. If you get them on the right day, they can certainly contribute. But with no Altuve, with no Jordan Alvarez, you're really limited in terms of what this team is compared to what their reputation is, what they typically do. So limited interest, and going up against one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher in baseball. So limited interest there. Going to Angel stacks on the FanDuel slate is a little bit viable because you get Shohei Ohtani in the lineup. You don't have him on DK. With no Ohtani, also with Trout out of the lineup and with Brandon Drury out of the lineup, I don't love the opportunity for the Angels stack on the DK slate because no Ohtani. So you're dealing with Taylor Ward, Mickey Moniak, Anthony Rendon, Hunter Renfroe, Eduardo Escobar as like your premium guys. It's kind of low end. They're all very cheap. They're easy to get to. Those guys could certainly succeed. Moniak's been very good this year, 136 plate appearances. He's racked 10 home runs. Taylor Ward, 9 homers in an up and down season. Renfroe, 15 homers, also an up and down season, but he's got 75 since the start of 2021. So that's a significant power bat with first base and outfield eligibility. Escobar lost his job in New York, but comes in here 2,600, 2,500 multi-position on DK. Definite power upside for the switch hitter. Matt Thaiss even, a viable candidate at catcher, but just losing all that star power with Ohtani and Trout out of the lineup on DK. I don't love it. At 4,500 on FanDuel, you can play Ohtani. You put him in conjunction in lineups with Taylor Ward, Moniak, Rendon, and Renfroe, and you're off and running. If you're building out a bunch of stacks, you get to shares of Ohtani, or you get to shares of the top 5, and then you can click in Eduardo Escobar. You can click in, even Thaiss is probably playable at 25 on the FanDuel slate. He's got 5 home runs and 198 plate appearances, a 111 WRC+. Not a great option, but if I'm saying that Luis Rengifo is a viable option from the 8 spot, then certainly Matt Thaiss is, despite his positioning. You just like the triple position eligibility, the cheap price on Luis Rengifo here. So no real interest in the Astros going up against Shohei Ohtani. No real interest in JP France, 8,500, 9,400. He's just a little high priced. Ohtani's going to be in the real life lineup regardless of which site you're playing on. He's a 17.6% strikeout guy. 3.26 ERA is good, but a 4.61 xFIP is probably the honest number. 1.21 whip. Giving up a little bit of premium contact. 3.66% home runs. This is maybe a little high for the hard hits in the barrels, but not by that much. Yeah, no real need to go to JP France shares here. Is another guy that's just oddly priced on FanDuel, 94. He should be the DK price on FanDuel, and he should be 1,000 less than this on DK. Then he would make some more sense. But definite interest in Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher on the DK slate. One of the top options, ranked in the top 3 on the DK slate for a pitcher. No real interest or limited interest in Angel stacks on the DK slate, but much more interest in Angel stacks on the FanDuel slate where I get Ohtani. Does that make sense? Did I get that right? Did I screw anything up? Stephen Leibowitz says, hey, the Red Sox are not playing Russ Snyder against the lefty to anoint Terry. Thankfully. Somebody woke up over there. He's viable. It's really what annoys me is when they hit him third. That's what drove me crazy. Leadoff, he's all right. It's still not the right move to make. It's still like, it's not like you're getting somebody who just absolutely crushes the world against lefties. It's just like, hey, this guy displays an okay hit tool and tends to get on base against lefties. So if you put that in the leadoff spot ahead of their good lineup, then it's fine, but yeah, not great. Steven says Rendon to the IL today. Probably. Hopefully you don't mean actually that they put him on the IL yet again. Hopefully you mean pending trip to the IL. Yeah, it tends to come back in a very limited fashion, but has still been viable this year. That's something worth touching on real quick. I know he hasn't hit for much power or the hit tools really come down as well, but still getting on base at a 361 clip. The WRC plus has dropped below average at 97, but it was no actually meaning. Oh, he went back on the IL again? All right, then I won't talk about him. That's bonkers. Dude can't stay healthy. Four minutes ago. Yep, there it is. Oh, shit. All right, let's take a quick look at this. Per Fan Nation, the SI.com Angels blog site, I guess. The Angels dropped the bombshell of a roster move. I don't know about that. The bombshell includes 8 players moving around, the biggest name being Anthony Rendon, who was placed on the injured list, as you said. They reinstated Matt Moore and brought Zach Neto back from the injured list. So Neto, I assume, will be in the lineup today. We've talked about him. Good hit tool. He was doing okay at the major league level. Hyper accelerated from the minors. He was drafted just last year and was the first player from last year's class to be promoted into the majors. Recalled Michael Stefanich from AAA. Selected the contract of infielder Trey Cabbage. I guess their 25th prospect. Not familiar with him. Outrighted David Fletcher to AAA Salt Lake. Placed Rendon on the IL. Placed Rendon on the IL and Joe Adell on the IL. Placed Sam Bachman on the IL. So I wouldn't call any of those bombshell moves like the person who wrote this article. But I guess Trey Cabbage is maybe interesting here. Let me see what he's done. Trey Cabbage, 26-year-old, not a great start. 26, AAA, never made the show before, not even a cup of coffee. That's not a great sign when you're 26. That said, 81 games, 352 plate appearances in AAA this season, 23 homers, 24 stolen bases. That's good. 31% strikeouts in AAA. That's not good. 290 ISO, 113 WRC plus. I'm going to call him like a quad A type, maybe a post type guy with some warts. This was the first year he ever even reached AAA. To take until you turn 26 to reach AAA is not a great sign. I would call this kid a quad A type player. Think Jake Berger. Think Brent Rooker. Probably that kind of guy. Don't know a ton about him. I don't want to completely throw him under that bus, but I'm seeing a lot of numbers that look like those two guys here. More speed, probably, given the 24 stolen bases this year. He's got that going for him. Last year, 136 AA plate appearances with LA, 10 stolen bases, 10 home runs. And while with Minnesota in AA, 278 plate appearances, 18 homers, 2 stolen bases. Maybe he can produce. Don't know if he's going to be in the lineup. Don't know if he's going to be even on the DFS sites. We talked about this game from top to bottom. Let's move on. Minnesota Twins, Oakland Athletics. If you had your money on, Terry really likes Kenta Maeda today. Cash your ticket. Terry really likes Kenta Maeda today. 7,700, 7,000, especially on FanDuel at that discount. Ooh, that looks pretty. 7 starts, 33 innings, 25.5 strikeouts, 25.5% strikeout rate, I should say, 5.8% walks, 5.18 ERA, not good, 3.97 xFIP, much, much better. 48.9% hard hits, not good. 92.7 miles an hour of exit velo, also not good. 2.92% home runs. Probably got a little lucky to keep a couple of those in the park, but hasn't really pitched all that much this season. That's not a deep innings count, even in the limited number of starts he's made, and just hasn't made a lot of starts. What I think is viable here is he's a good pitcher over time, guy that I used to trust. Has his flaws, has had his warts, but a good strikeout pitcher who against this Oakland A's lineup, I think has some good upside for depth. In his last start out before the break on the 4th of July, he went 7 innings, struck out 9 Royals. Similar upside for strikeouts here. Gave up a home run, gave up 3 hits, 1 earned, 2 runs overall. Only walked 1. He's very, very good at limiting walks, keeping himself out of trouble. He went 5 innings in each of the starts before that, including the 2 starts before that was against the Tigers. Struck out 8, walked 2, 3 hits, no earned. Good 5-inning start there. The next game was against the Braves in Atlanta. Struck out 4, walked 2, gave up 2 earned, but no home runs. That's a plus. 5 hits in 5 innings. It's not a bad start. It's not a great start, not a good DFS start, but that's not a bad start against that Braves lineup. So I feel like we're getting a Kenta Maeda who's pitching deeper into games, kind of rounding into form. Maybe there's enough on the bone here. He affords you the ability to stack Coors Field plus good team. Not to give away my pitcher in my placeholder lineup. He affords the ability to stack premium Braves and premium whoever the hell else was over 5 runs. Red Sox? Forget. He's the linchpin guy if I'm looking for a value starter today. I think Kenta Maeda is my guy. I think he's my linchpin. I think he's the way that I'm most frequently going to access those high-end combinations. There are other guys in similar price points, particularly on DK at 77. It's a very good value price, very good price for his potential upside here, but there are other options. He's got a stellar matchup going up against this limited A's team. I think we got the confirmed A's lineup. We got both confirmed lineups. How about that? A's are leading off Ryan Nola into JJ Bleday, Brent Rooker, Seth Brown, Soderstrom, Geloff. Let me drop it in here. I'm going to drop this in. We're going to talk about the end of this game, and then we're going to fire through the last game and that excellent pitching matchup with only really limited interest in the bats in that last game. Let me just grab the Twins. All these links, and I still scroll. Oh, the Twins were in there already, too. How about that? All right. This is the confirmed version of the Athletics lineup. Oh, I forgot to put Soderstrom in there. Damn it. Oh, all right. So Soderstrom and Zach Geloff not available on the FanDuel slate. Disappointing job by the Blue site, considering they were both called up yesterday. They're dead minimum price on the DK slate. We talked about their quality. I do think there's upside there. If I'm going to A's, I'm certainly going to include them at the dead minimum. Really, really helps with value. I suspect that given the buzz around these guys, given the general Brent Rooker buzz, given the cheap prices on these guys, this might become a somewhat popular value play. Not like crazy, high-owned stack overall, but just I think it takes any of the appeal away. If there's going to be enough shares there to soak up whatever I gain from going to them as value. On FanDuel, I think it's entirely skippable since you don't get the two rookies there. On DK, they're more on the board given those two rookies being at minimum price. I don't think they're going to project if I drop them in there. Obviously, we're getting all these NAs because they have no major league stats. I was just hoping that I could get them to fill in quickly with a projection, but they won't because they're not. They're probably not geared up on the back end. Considering they were promoted yesterday, I also should have taken some time to update and catch them in the model here, but I didn't because I suck too. Oh well. Yeah, so that's the read. If you're playing A's, it's probably on DK, but I think they get a little popular value-wise. If you're playing them on FanDuel, it's really about that top four, but I don't really believe in any of those guys. Brent Rooker's like the example of the quad A hitter that I just gave. Seth Brown is probably their most talented hitter. A handful of home runs and stolen bases, like 25-11, I think, last year. 8 home runs, 2 stolen bases this year, 201, 266, 384 over 173 plate appearances. Was injured earlier in the season, but still a good barrel rate, good hard hit rate. Seth Brown is viable here, as well as JJ Bleday and Ryan Noda. Significant strikeout rates, 3 of those guys in the top 4, all above 30% strikeouts. Supports my upside for Kenta Maeda here. I like the opportunity for Maeda. It's a definite spot for me. Ah, shit. And then we've got to change Paul Blackburn, too. Did we figure out what's going on with that pitching spot? Google Ken Waldichuk here real quick. They do not have that updated. They do have it updated on Schmebs. All right. Bear with me one sec, guys. Let's get this knocked out. Full career is fine for him because it's just basically the last couple seasons anyway. All right. I forgot to look at where they were versus where they are, but you probably should have seen a little bit of a bump in home run upside here for the Twins. I would imagine a bump in all these projections as well. Some of those guys jumped up into to green dots probably here that weren't before. That is to say, the matchup against Ken Waldichuk is a plus matchup for the Twins. 19.7% strikeouts, 12.8% walks in 72 innings, 11 starts. He's been pitching more in a hybrid relief role. Here in the this mouse is killing me now. I just want to get off this. Not get off the show because I'm enjoying doing this and hanging out with you guys, but given the technical issues and the need to build lineups, I just kind of want to get through this. So Waldichuk's been pitching in like a hybrid role, bouncing between opening relief appearances, long relief appearances, bulk relief appearances, traditional starts. He's been all over the place. In recent games, he has not gone, he went 4 1/3 in a bulk relief appearance against the Tigers on the 5th. He went an inning and a third on the 9th against the Red Sox in relief. Gave up a homer, struck out 1. I don't see Waldichuk being viable here, even if he gets 5 innings. It just doesn't seem like a good spot. Seems like a opportunity to potentially target with some of the Twins' power hitters. That said, I don't love this Twins lineup. They're targetable for strikeout upside with better pitching talent. 67-59. If I had any idea that Waldichuk was going 5 even, maybe there's a little bit of an argument to be made for strikeout upside, but he's just been so lousy for contact, so lousy for giving up opportunities via the walk that I just don't see it. So I don't really like Ken Waldichuk. I'll get to some Twins. Carlos Correa has been a disaster this year. 11 home runs on the season, 94 WRC+, just basically proving the Mets right. Like I wrote in the article, that's very difficult to do, but he's doing it this season. 45-32 for the talent, for the guy that we know that Carlos Correa is over time. That's a great price, but he hasn't been that guy for most of this season. Donovan Solano, 2,600, 2,500. Good little value play. Correlated scoring with Byron Buxton, with Kyle Farmer and his sneaky power that we've talked about several times. 2,300, 2,400, second base, third base, second base, shortstop. For a guy who's hit mid-teens home runs each of the last 2 years, that's sneaky. That's viable. I like that spot. Jose Miranda does a lot of what Donovan Solano does in terms of being more hit tool oriented, more of a correlated scoring play. Willie Castro, also kind of more hit tool oriented, good stolen base upside, but hasn't done a ton at the plate after kind of a hot start. Value option for sure. All these guys are cheap. They're easy to get to. Vasquez and Michael A, both mix and match kind of guys. Michael A, 10 home runs, 11 stolen bases. Let's go, Michael. Bring him to life. We tend to conjure those long balls from Michael A. He's at the dead minimum on DK today, 13% barrels. Love that guy. Love that opportunity in the low-owned, zero ownership, zero price type of home run upside. And then Max Kepler, 12 home runs on the season, a 2.02 ISO. You can get to shares of Max Kepler if you're going to Twins. Let's put it that way. Yeesh. A lot of talking. So significant interest in Kenta Maeda for the discount. No real interest in A's bats, but I get it, particularly on DK. If they're popular, I think you can go to other spots. No interest in A's pitching. Moderate interest in Twins power bats, particularly from the right side, particularly with the pitching change. I liked Paul Blackburn. I was much more hesitant to roster Twins when he was pitching. There's more upside for them now. Last game on deck. Pitching matchup. Possibly the best pitching matchup on the slate. It's in the very last game of the night. I like both of these guys. At the top of the show, we talked briefly about the upside for Erod, considering that nobody's going to him. That was in the FanDuel price, but I assume that's probably also true at 97 on DK. He'll be a little bit more popular relatively just by virtue of needing 2 pitchers, but that's a fairly high price for him on DK. He's not exactly an SP2 there. You can see he projects great. Luis Castillo on the other side projects as my number 2 overall, going up against the Detroit Tigers here. I think there's tons and tons and tons of upside for Luis Castillo, and he's cheap, 8,900, 9,700. Going to be your most popular option of the day. We also lost Tyler Glasnow, actually. So now that I think it through, Luis Castillo is the number 1 projection. Slide Ohtani up to number 2 on the DK slate. Everybody moves up a little bit because Glasnow was number 1 in that spot. So Castillo now, especially at price, this is just gonna be a really popular spot, but very, very worth it. Castillo on the season, 26.9% strikeouts, a 1.04 whip, a 15.4% swinging strike rate. Dominant swinging strike rate. 2.85 ERA, a higher 3.69 xFIP, a little bit of issues with the home runs, 9.1% barrels, 43.2% hard hits, 90 miles an hour exit velo, 3.45% home runs. Not a tragic home run number, but definitely worth throwing into the mix and mentioning against the Tigers here. In a hitter's park, with Luis Castillo on the mound, I don't think the Tigers are a good option for a value play, good option for a hedge. In a different ballpark, I would maybe try and make that argument now that they've got Kerry Carpenter, now that they've got Riley Green back in the lineup. With those 2 lefties here, there'd be a little bit more to chase. I like this lineup a little bit better than I used to with those 2 hitters in it, with Spencer Torkelson coming around a little bit. 12 home runs on the season and 98 WRC plus for Torkelson. We've talked before about his 12.2% barrels, 48.6% hard hits, and decent walk rates, okay strikeout rates. So I think Torkelson's maybe turning into a major leaguer, slowly but surely. Is still not great. but he's still cheap, 3,600, 2,800. If you're going Tigers, you include Torkelson. You definitely include all three lefties from McKinstry, Riley Green, and Kerry Carpenter. That's where much of the team's quality is and has been this season for run creation. Green missed some time, but 305, 373, 462, a 136 WRC plus. He's their best player right now overall. But Carpenter's a good lefty bat, 11.6% barrels, 44.6% hard hits, 8 home runs on the season. Also missed some time with injuries, 167 plate appearances, 222 ISO, 121 WRC plus. No coincidence that the two guys who have missed the most time are the two guys who are above average for run creation. I would drop down the lineup, include some Akil Baddoo, probably ahead of Javi Baez. I would put Javi Baez ahead of Miguel Cabrera. Andy Ibanez and Jake Rogers probably also ahead of Miguel Cabrera, just based on the hitting 7th. Maybe Miggy climbs up the board a little bit there. But it's not a good Tigers lineup. It's not a good spot. It's a pitching park going up against a very good pitcher. I don't really see it. If I need bats in the pitcher's park in this game, I think I'm targeting Erod, much as I'm kind of remiss to do it and probably won't do it all that much. There's just so many strikeouts in this Mariners lineup that I think it just pushes upside in his direction. He's striking out 26.3% on the season, has a 2.64% ERA, only a 3.40 xFIP, a 1 whip. He's pitched really well. He's missed some time. I think we're still getting him out to like 90 plus pitches here, though. So I don't really worry about the missed time. He only made 1 start since coming back. He went... It's in here somewhere. I know I wrote about it. 4 innings, but struck out 7. So if you remember what I was saying about the pitch count and how that works, he actually threw a fairly advanced number of pitches against the Athletics, faced 18 hitters through 79 pitches in what was a decent turnaround. So if he threw 79 in that one, I'm expecting 90 or so, 90 plus. I think with that kind of a pitch count, with this kind of a strikeout rate on the opposing side, this confirmed lineup, 27.3% strikeouts, there's definite upside for Erod here, and he's been really on form this year. A couple of clunkers in there before he got hurt, but pitched really, really well at the beginning of the year, and is a guy that over time we've been interested in. This is a guy I believe in over time. Has had a few seasons where he got really unlucky, but pitched well otherwise. So I love this spot for Erod, particularly at no popularity. I'll definitely sign up for some. That said, a few shares of Mariners bats, probably not out of the question. J.P. Crawford up top, 362 on base, 121 WRC plus, correlated scoring play. Put him together with Julio Rodriguez, who enjoyed the All-Star break at home. Ty France, Teoscar Hernandez, Eugenio Suarez. All 5 of those guys are viable. Tommy Murphy, AJ Pollock, Jose Caballero, Dylan Moore kind of drops off around the bottom end. Still a bunch of strikeouts to chase here with Erod, and not a ton of quality, not a ton of power, not a ton of sequencing, hit tools, on-base skills, or any of that. So I'm not that worried about the bottom end here. I like the upside for Erod quite a bit. It's really these guys. I would actually do it this way probably. If you're on DK, you can throw Murphy into the mix for sure as a power hitting catcher. 107 plate appearances, 5 home runs, 13.2% barrels, 41.2% hard hits. Strikes out 29% of the time. Tommy Murphy's one of those more often than not going to put a 0 or a home run into your lineup types. But he is slashing 278, 330, 526 on the year, 139 WRC plus in his limited sample, so it's worth mentioning. All right, gang, that's it. Top to bottom, 6:15. We're going to do a really quick look at the pitching board here because these optimizers are going to run slow today, and there's a lot to get through. So we're scratching Tyler Glass now because that game's not playing. So we're dealing with Luis Castillo. We're scratching Shohei Ohtani on the FanDuel slate because he's not a pitcher, but we get him on DK where we like him quite a bit. Erod lands now 3rd overall on the board by pitching projection. Worth the money. I think he's definitely worth the price, particularly if nobody's going to him. Ignore where Ken Waldichuk is. That's after I changed it, I need to sort it. There they go. Charlie Morton, Dean Kramer. Kramer, a decent little value play there. 31 point projection in the FanDuel scoring. Baltimore, Miami going up against that Miami lineup for 86.71. That's a good value play. That's a sneaky enough value play that make it viable. Kenta Maeda, I love that spot. I think I talked about it quite a bit. 7,000, 7,700. I like it even at 7,700 better than I like the Kramer play. Just a guy that I think is a better pitcher, better strikeout pitcher, guy I trust over time. So I would include him more enthusiastically than Kramer. Barrios, talked about not really liking this spot quite as much, especially with look how his price stands out by comparison to all these other guys that surround him. And he's going up against the Diamondbacks, who don't strike out very much, who have all that run creation ability, who have a good amount of home runs in their lineup. I don't love this spot, especially for a pitcher that's like, I know he's pitched on form this year, but I don't really like him. I don't really trust him. I think out of the top end, Jose Berrios is the most skippable guy outside of the guys who aren't pitching. Bayo I like quite a bit for value. Sandy Alcantara I like quite a bit for value. Definite upside there, especially 6,800 on DK. I take it back. Sandy Alcantara is probably the best DK play in terms of an SP2. Sub 7,000 price for Sandy Alcantara. He should not be on that list. Period. Miles Michaelis, value. Justin Verlander, not great, but arguably value at least at 8,000 on DK. Just a terrible matchup against the Dodgers. $6,000 for Dick Mountain going up against the Giants. I like the bats better, but it projects okay. Projects well enough that you can play it. 78, I don't love it on FanDuel. 6,000, I'd rather spend 800 and get to Sandy Alcantara, but it's a playable spot. Definite piece of value on the DK slate. John Gray, right there in the mix with all these other guys. 89, 83, totally good value play. Guardians don't strike out that much. That's the one thing you have to worry about, but they're a non-threatening team. Like I said, guys, look at all these guys projected between 25 and 30 points. These guys are all basically the same. Not Maeda. These guys, all basically the same. Savali, not really in play here. He's like the cut point. It's a pretty clear cut point where it drops by 5 points. He's going up against the Rangers. JP France going up against the Angels. Hendo against the Red Sox. Waldichuk or whoever it is against the Twins. I don't really love anything from Savali down. I like Savali as a pitcher, but not in this spot, not against the Rangers, not for these prices. So yeah, everything up here, much more playable than everything down here. Corbin Burns, I didn't touch on in this little recap. Another guy who I would just kind of chalk him up as skippable based on projecting near the bottom of that plateau and being one of the more expensive guys in it. I like him better at 84 on the DK slate, but I think I'm just getting the bats in that Brewers Reds game. All right, guys, that's it. Let me get the hell out of here. Made a 15.5 outs on Prize Picks. I like as an over. Yeah, he got more. Didn't I say he got more outs than that last time? I guess it was a hitter count that I gave, but he must have been around that total for outs. 4 innings, it's 12 outs, right? That's hey, quick math. Yeah, I like that as an over. I wouldn't be shocked to see him go 6. All right, fellas, let me punch out of here. I got some lineups to build. I really appreciate everybody hanging out. Long show today, lots to talk about. Good luck out there. Somebody go win something. Win something and then let me know about it. Don't care if you got the logo on it or not. Helps if you do. If you don't, no hard feelings. I want to see somebody out there win a big prize tonight. And there's a lot of good prizes out there to be won. Cheapo tournament on FanDuel with a decent prize pool. Decent little 100K on FanDuel. Obviously the typically good spot on DK. So I'm going to go win something. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. We're out of here, gang. Hitting the end broadcast button right now. I mean now.